All right, greetings everybody. Patriots Lament number 457. We have some pretty sweet new intro video and music. We're working on making the Super Pro. Grace put that together, and it is part of a longer project of making this podcast extra classy and super pro. So hope you guys like it. Today we will be talking about a variety of different things. We're going to start off with Corey taking us through some birch syrup stuff. He's been collecting and distilling birch syrup despite the lockdown. And then a thing we've been talking about amongst ourselves is how to be more transient, or the ability to be more transient in the future. And the theme that's going to come out is being a technological gypsy. So like staying on the move, but not giving up too much, and being able to use new tech to make that work. And then we have topics from yesterday. We did a short Friday show, talking about the markets, and then some of the numbers, how they're being presented, and a couple other topics like that. So we'll get to the more normal topics as the show goes on. But we'll do something different to start off with. Do you want to give us a little rundown of your birch syrup distillation, Corey?
Yeah. Let me. Yeah. So I actually, David.
Oh, we have lost your mic. There you go.
Is it working now? Okay.
Yep. You're good.
So we went out on some trees and around my house and drilled some holes. Got some stuff from Home Depot, and we just drank the water. And then we found that the water, of course, doesn't last very long. And so this year I had a little extra time, tapped some more trees, and let me get my screen share on. Entire screen. Oh, wow. Oops. Oops. Okay, here we go. So at first I started it on the stove in the house, and Fairbanks has very expensive electricity. So I ran some numbers, and I found that it was coming out to about $1 a gallon to boil the water. And birch syrup has anywhere between 50 and 100 to 1 birch water to syrup. So that's $50 to $100 per gallon of final birch syrup just in energy cost. And so it's somewhere around there. So I decided I needed a cheaper energy source for boiling water. So this is the hood from a stove that my dad and I took apart last year. We had it in our gazebo, and I had some bricks. And so I built a little outdoor oven there, or boiler. So I just built a fire in it and put the birch. I got a boiling pot from Samson's Hardware. Always shopping local. And so this is kind of my latest setup. I have. Let me see if I can zoom. I built a shield around the. That's a little too far. It's just a chimney, and so it's a little shield that goes around the pot, and that helps keep the exhaust gas from blowing away. And the exhaust gas comes up, and it heats the sides of the pot as well. And then it's really hard to control the temperature on the wood stove, and I usually end up boiling it too much. So I do a finish boil on propane on very, very low, so it'll just simmer for a couple hours, and I have it set up where it won't boil on the propane. It just slowly steams off, and so that seems to be working. So I do I run around, collect from my trees, and then I usually have 8 to 10 gallons, or to probably 10 to 12 gallons of water at a time. So I split it up, and I'll do the initial heat on the wood, and then I'll put one bucket on the or one pot on the propane, and then keep one on the wood, and kind of cycle them back and forth. And so far, I have like 1.5 big quart jars of syrup, and it's pretty good stuff.
Can you go back to the nozzle coming out of the tree? Just because, like, the amount of effort required, the baseline amount of effort required to do this is really low. Josh got us clued in on this last year. My parents did this when I was a kid with my older siblings, but I don't remember doing it. Yeah, Corey and I went to Home Depot. We just bought these tees, and then we angle cut the end of them. Did we even angle cut the end? I don't even remember. We might have.
We did. I didn't angle cut the ones. I bought some more tees, and I did not cut those.
Yeah,
and the water still comes out. It works.
Yeah, just drill a hole and stick it in. Grab the birch water. So yeah.
Oh, and then last year we made I don't have a picture of it, but it's a little 3D printed plug, and it is the perfect size for going in that hole. And so you just tap it in with a hammer. And I uploaded that part to Thingiverse, where it's been downloaded a couple, I don't know, 100 times or something. But yesterday, or a couple of days ago, I modified the part so it has the date on the outside, or the year on the outside of every plug. So if you're gonna give your trees a break for a year or a couple of years, you have the year that it was last tapped. So you can do that with flagging too, but it's nice to have it right on the plug. So I'll send a link for that, so you guys can download it and 3D print your own.
And those plugs are PLA, right?
Yep,
So in theory,
corn based.
Yeah, in theory they will biodegrade.
Yeah, I went to one of the trees that we'd put the plug in last year, and the hole looked pretty good. It looked like it had absorbed some of the dye from the plastic, but you can buy the PLA in natural. So it's just the kind of a gray, yellow looking color. And that's just the raw plastic without any dye in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, way cool.
Mm-hmm.
So things you can do in your extra time here.
And that very nice orange bucket that you had, Corey, was that a Home Depot orange 5-gallon bucket?
It was indeed, and that is my water bucket for cooling the fire down when it gets a little too rambunctious.
And where can people pick up these Home Depot 5-gallon buckets?
I believe anywhere except Lowe's.
Okay.
There's an interesting thing about 5-gallon buckets. I was talking to a very serious survivalist friend of mine, and one of the games he used to play was, if you could go back 100 years or 200 years, what would you take with you? And plastic 5-gallon buckets were like right at the top of his list. He's like, you have no idea how awesome these are compared to having to make containers the way they did 200 years ago.
Yeah. Well, barrels. Yeah, everything was very, very slow.
Yeah, and heavy.
Yep. Yeah, here
And
I got
costly.
my. Let's see. I got a link here for that part. We can put it in the.
Oh yeah. Okay,
Public.
here's the plug. If you guys are 3D printing type folks, or if you know somebody who is, and you want to tap your birch trees, and you want a plug that'll fit the hole perfect, there it is.
Yeah. Anyone in Fairbanks, I can print plugs for you. So.
Yeah, right. What's your website?
Matterworks.design. matterworks.design.
Boom. Yeah. So quite an evolution from last year. Anyway, it's something different. Before the show, we were talking about it. We were going through the slideshow, and last year we were just getting birch water and drinking it. It goes bad in like 2 days, and it goes really bad. Like, oh. And we were talking about freezing it or whatever, and you totally stepped up the game this year. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I had to do.
I wonder how.
Yeah, my wife, she collected a whole bunch of birch water, and I had to buy her a chest freezer to store it. Yeah.
Well, I wonder if it would go from really bad to pretty good in about 2 weeks.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Oh, if you let it, still waters run deep. That's
A little
something
early there, huh, guys?
Yeah, that's something we've talked about too. Is there's a little bit of sugar. Is using a still and making some alcohol from it. So anyway,
I think they make vodkas with it.
With birch.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So something different to start off the show. Another topic that we've been talking about, which flows into our more normal list of topics, is the world that we are living in now. If you think back 20 years, like think back to the end of the 90s, you have to kind of make a large leap to put what's going on right now into some sort of perspective, I think. You think about the situation with like taxes and inflation and regulatory stability. Things like NAFTA were a huge deal in the 90s. That was like 1993, right? That was like a big deal. It's a huge economic disruptor or whatever. NAFTA wouldn't even make the news. It wouldn't even fit. It's like so minor compared to what's going on. It wouldn't even move the needle. Maybe it would, but probably not. So with the increasing instability, and by instability, not necessarily like collapse, but just rapid changes and having to adapt to it. Stuff like having a physical place is really being discouraged, like by the society, by the government, by the, I don't know, the structure of the world right now. Being in a single physical location is more of a liability than an asset, which is how you make an unstable society, right? If you want a stable society, you have a good system of respect for property. This is like Robert Wenzel's Private Property Society book is all about this. And then people will tend to settle in one place, and they'll tend to build, and they'll tend to increase the value of what's around them in that place. That's how community comes to be. But right now we're in a I don't know, something Mike has talked about a lot is these waves, these cycles. And we're on the down slope of the cycle where things are being destabilized, largely out of, any individual's control. It's because of individuals' actions, but a lot of those decisions are out of our control. And so we have all been having this conversation about what do you do about that, really? Because there's all these crazy libertarian ideas like the freedom ship. Do you guys remember the freedom ship? It was this, they were going to raise $5 billion or something. And then they were going to build like a 2-mile long boat, and it was going to be this free city or whatever. And it was nonsense. You'll just never accumulate. You'll never centralize that much money to do that big of a project without it getting shut down. Like even the Google barge, when I was in the Bay Area working there, they were building the Google barge. That never went anywhere. It raised too many red flags and people were upset about it.
As far as we know, the only successful data storage system like that is the one that was premiered in Smart Pipe.
Yes, that's right. The Sphere.
It was a sphere so that bombs and ladders go right off of it.
It was so round and so smooth that it was impervious. If you guys don't know about Smart Pipe, just check it out on.
It's a pretty good analog for technology in general.
on YouTube. Yes, absolutely. Layla points out that you need a physical place to tap birch trees. Corey actually has the answer to this. Last year, we were walking around Birch Hill. We were up on the trails up there, and we noticed all the birch trees that were not being tapped. It's just crazy. Like almost all the birch trees in the borough are not being tapped, especially the ones that are on borough land. And, because that would probably be illegal or something. And so Corey had an idea for a product that would be like a stealth. It would have like a birch print on it. And it'd be like a camelback type thing that hugs the tree. And you tap it and plug it in and it would be all hidden. And he had a good name for it. The name for it was the reason for the product, which was surreptitious.
Surreptitious, yes.
So there's the answer to needing a physical place to tap birch trees. Just tap them and hook up surreptitious and come back a day later. Anyway, surreptitiously. It almost has to be made just because of the name.
Or just you just throw a yellow safety vest on and just go plug those suckers. I mean,
Right.
As long as you put a little sign up, men working or something like that, anything like that. As long as you got your hard hat and your vest.
It could be for
Just start
environmental
tapping.
research.
Yeah.
Cover
Actual
all-
city and borough employees will stop by to see if you need a hand.
They will. It looks like you're doing something.
So we record
Coveralls.
this.
Coveralls are very similar. Coveralls and a hand truck. Like you could probably walk into a bank and take the vault if you had coveralls and a hand truck.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So there are some drawbacks to not having a physical place, but
No, it is true. Just it's we were doing it's several years back. We were bidding on a job, and these homes were going to get completely redone. Some of them demoed and all this, and they're in cul-de-sacs. There's like 11 of them. So we're walking in the cul-de-sacs, looking at everything, trying to figure out what we're going to bid, and then we get a phone call. Hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're just looking at the job. Yeah, well, people are freaking out because these two guys are walking around their parking lots and walking over the other parking lots. And like, oh, he said, yeah, do you got your vest on? I said, no. Put your vest on. Put the vest on. Proceed to do the rest with no phone calls. As long as you got that on, like, oh, official. Brr.
Yeah.
It works.
David and I had a vest experience last summer on a job site.
we did. We did.
We got reported for not participating in the vest parade.
I think we had trouble for not having a hard hat as well.
Oh yeah.
This was on a road construction
In the middle of basically a parking lot.
Yeah, with
no hard hat. Yeah.
No bridges over our heads or anything. Yeah. Anyway, yay for
I was on a job up in Coldfoot one time where the company halfway through the job they decided we had to wear our hard hats in our trucks. So through quite a bit of rebellion on that, several of us were fired and sent packing. Yeah, hard hat in the truck.
Yeah.
I had
So yeah. Go for it.
I had a surveyor out first mine I worked at. He it's like minus 20, minus 30 out in Nome. He was out surveying. He got in trouble because he was wearing bunny boots because they weren't steel toed. You ever wear steel toe boots at minus 20 or 30?
Not for long.
Yeah,
He got rid up by some IMSHA guy over it.
yeah.
So yeah, that fits nicely into our transient discussion of avoiding regulations without raising red flags. So these big projects like the Freedom Ship or whatever, they're too big.
It's centralized. It's another form of centralization. You have too much valuable stuff in one place.
Totally. And it doesn't fit, like you were saying, it doesn't fit the mold. You can't blend in. Like if you're gonna move around a bunch, if you're gonna do something weird, you don't want to stick red flags in yourself before you do it. you want to put on your multicam. You want to put on your cultural multicam, or your cultural cryptech that you get from China illegally,
If you can afford it.
if you can afford it. You want to blend in as much as possible. And so we've been talking, the four of us and a couple other people have been talking about this a lot. And one of the ways to do this, there's these tiny home, container home, trailer type communities. And a lot of folks are just doing it because it's fun. It's a way to express themselves without needing $8 million to build their dream home. A lot of people don't want a big space because a big space is a nightmare. Like your house owns you to some extent. And the more you have to manage, the more it owns you. And so a smaller place is easier if you can just. I had a friend, Brent, in Fairbanks. He built his house as a dry house, and with the ability to plumb it later. And the whole benefit of that was when he wanted to leave in the winter, he just flipped off the master breaker and took off. He didn't heat it. He didn't worry about it freezing. He didn't worry about anything. So there's a few strategies for that. Anyway, the tiny home thing is interesting, but the problem is it doesn't fit the mold. Tiny homes are homes, but they're not permanent. And so there's all sorts of zoning issues they run into, like there's minimum square footage laws where they're not big enough to be certified as a home. So you're not technically allowed to live in them full time. And so if your neighbors don't like you and snitch on you, you get run out. Also, a lot of them can't be transported very well because they're structurally sound. But if you take them on rough roads or anything, if you took one up and down the Alcan, it would, be rallied. So we've been talking about container homes and trailers and stuff like this, and there seem to be some pretty good solutions there. One of the things that has been emerging from our conversations is structuring your businesses to be able to travel with you, which not everybody can do, but some people can. Being able to take those on the road, and then basically, if you process material, let's say you do birch water, right? That's a seasonal thing. You have all your gear to do it. You travel up to Alaska or whatever to make your Alaska birch water. You don't need to take much with you. You need to take your tools and maybe your 3D printer to make all your birch plugs and stuff.
Which you'll have anyways, of course.
Which you'll have, of course, you'd have it with you. But yeah, you take it. You take your home and your occupation, whatever. You take it to the destination. You get your raw materials, you process your raw materials, you deliver them. Let's say you make birch syrup, you sell it to local stores because they sell it to tourists over the summer. Then you're done. On to the next thing. Or you hang out for the summer. But there are real practical ways to do that. And it's something that that I've been looking at myself for my business. My business doesn't have to be in a fixed location for most of what I do. And the tools today are so much better than they were 20 years ago. Like, the world is a much less stable place, but with stuff like cryptocurrency, you could make your income, pay your taxes on it in the jurisdiction you made it in, and then it's taxed dollars, and you can take those and you can exchange them into crypto, and then put them on an exchange and trade them away into something else, so they're no longer part of the system. And then you got this pile of crypto that lives nowhere. So crossing borders becomes super easy. You're not taking huge amounts of precious metals across borders. You're not transporting cash. You're not dealing with international wires from your own bank account to your other bank account, paying all these bank fees. That aspect of it has gotten way, way easier. So, and then getting raw materials too. Same thing, like FedEx and UPS, FedEx in particular. I'm a FedEx shareholder, by the way. They'll deliver pretty much anywhere you want. And even the paperwork for dealing with tariffs, if you're in a different jurisdiction, it's gotten way, way easier. It's a lot better than it used to be. So there are real practical ways of doing that don't require, $5 billion and a 300-foot or a 2-mile long ship. And if you have something that you really want to do, you can actually start to plan around that. And so that's something that's something I think you guys are going to see more of on this YouTube channel and this show as we go through the summer. We're going to, the four of us are going to be collaborating on some weird projects and stuff. And that's going to be one of the themes.
Yeah. And for a lot of the work that I do, even though it's hardware based, I'm still able to do a lot of the design work just on my laptop. And the last year, I've been traveling a lot, and I haven't spent more than a month in any place, before going somewhere else or going back, and just been moving around. And going through that exercise has kind of focused the type of business that I take on, and it's caused me to practice the working remote thing, which is definitely we've talked about it before. It's not as good as being in one spot, but the more you do it, the better you get. You learn the flow of how to do it more efficiently, and that fits in well with being able to live anywhere and to work from anywhere, and especially post-COVID. I think we've talked about seeing a move out of the urban into the more rural, and people working from home and collaborating remotely and all of these things. And that nests very well with what we're talking about being more mobile on the road.
Yeah, the Roma people, who we would know of as gypsies, their flag, the Roma flag, is a big wheel in the middle, and their culture is pretty interesting. There's obvious downsides to it, but I'm going to put up the Wikipedia link. I read this a few years ago. The Romani. I read this a few years ago. I was reading about the Basques as well. The Basques are very interesting. In the same way, Basques don't identify with a region. They don't identify with geography. They identify with language. To be Basque is to speak Basque, and to speak Basque is to be Basque. And the Romani, they identify with being able to move, basically. And so they span from, originally they span from India all the way to, to the Atlantic Ocean and Europe, and then, further across the world. But some of their migration, they'll do like a really slow migration, like the monarch butterfly or something like that, from India to, a family will start making its way to Europe. It might take 60 or 70 years. They might pick away at it for more than a generation. And then they get there, and then it's like, let's pick our way back. And part of the way of life is intentionally avoiding the trap of believing that you are the jurisdiction that you happen to be in. They have an intentional avoidance of that. And the European Union's actually been tricky for them, because it's so big that you move from country to country to country to country, which all have distinct cultures and everything. But the European Union says, you've been in our tax jurisdiction the whole time. And that's actually created some issues for them. Which, of course, in North America, that's a possibility with NAFTA and stuff like that, moving between Mexico and Canada and the US. But that can be navigated too. And you can do everything, even doing everything above board, like some of our commenters have pointed out. Well, yeah, you also get out of paying property tax. Well, yeah, how sweet is that? I mean, my property tax in Fairbanks before I built my dang house was a third what it is now. So it's like $4,500 a year now, and it was like $1,000 or $1,200 before I built my house. That adds up. I've owned that property for 10 years now, so that's $3,000 extra per year. $3,500 extra per year, about $3,000 extra. That's $30,000 of property tax. So, anyway, there's all sorts of all the incentives of the world we live in are getting aligned in that direction, and those are things we've been thinking about, and we're gonna be documenting some projects in those directions.
I think there's a couple different models, and one of them that I've thought about is where you have a small amount of stuff that you take with you at any time, but you have a couple small houses, either container houses or tiny homes or whatever, and they're on property that is spread out across the continent. So maybe you have three places, and they don't have to be tiny homes. It's just, the point is that maybe they're mobile, but none of them are very big, so that if any one of them is lost to political stuff or the local government, it's not too big of a deal. And then you can move with the seasons or just with what's going on, the political stuff. You always have a place to go in a different climate zone, so you can grow food or get away from laws as political climates change. So you get to pick your home, and you already have one set up. The other one is to take your home with you all the time, and this can take the form of RVs. There's a fairly large community of people who already live in RVs and fifth wheels, and they're pretty nice. Some of my first calls for this channel, I was in Southern California in a fifth wheel trailer, and I spent a couple of weeks living in it, and it's not too bad. A couple of weeks isn't that long, but I enjoyed it, and it was a good experiment. So you can carry your home with you. If your home is strong enough, you can put it on a barge. You can take it on the seas, and that kind of lends itself more to container homes. But anytime you modify a container, it loses its ISO or DOT certification. So then it has to go on top. It's no longer, it gets transported as a different type of cargo, which is more expensive. But it's still, you don't have to worry about water getting in and that kind of stuff. So as long as you've done your windows right.
If it's small enough, I've seen bandanas on the end of a stick.
Mm-hmm.
Very mobile.
Yep. Snails carry their shell.
Yeah, they do too.
Yeah, humans are historically transient too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, they like to move.
Yeah, they like to move. I mean, that's part of the. I don't know. To pick your narrative for why we walk on 2 feet, but walking on 2 feet is way more efficient than walking on 4 or walking hunched over. And like, people can walk 12 miles a day. The average person who's not on the American diet can walk 12 miles a day every day into their 80s. Australian Aboriginals still do this, and they don't die of they die of sudden heart attacks. But they're, from a fitness level, the guys in their 80s are indistinguishable from the guys in their 20s, basically. And so human beings are made to move, and the brain is made to adapt to moving, and we're made to learn new skills. We actually this is Corey, you played with this, having a treadmill while you work, so you could move while you work. Didn't work for a few logistical reasons, but people, kids, do way better. I was reading this research. I'm reading this book. I highly recommend it. Brain Rules. And they did this research project where a bunch of schools were cutting out recess because they wanted to get better math scores. They're like, we're going to substitute another math class for recess. Everybody's math score went down. And the reason was because if the kids hadn't exercised, they couldn't process information as well. It didn't even have to do with being restless. It had to do with their brain. When they were staying in one place, their brain started to shut down. It said, no new input. I don't need to do anything interesting. And so abstract concepts couldn't go in either. So there's advantages to moving around. There's disadvantages, which you go on forever, but there are advantages to it too.
And like Layla pointed out, there's no you need a place to have birch trees, but every place you go has something like birch trees. You don't. It's not the specific. It's the finding what's in your environment that you can work with wherever you go.
Yep, which will be needed in the coming years.
My wife and I talked about we talked about this a long time ago. But we've never done it, and we still want to do it. That's be a yurt, setting up a yurt and moving into that, because those are portable. You take them apart, throw them in the back of a truck, and go. And think about it, they were designed to be for nomadic people. They're Mongolian, so. And I haven't looked into it too deeply, but at the very least, your property taxes would be significantly reduced with it. It's not a permanent structure. It doesn't fit this. It doesn't fit the definition of a permanent structure in a lot of jurisdictions, probably in most. So you'd probably be exempted from property taxes as well. So you could just have a cheap piece of property, pay minimal tax on it, and live there semi-permanently. Weather turns bad, you take it down, you drive off to somewhere more hospitable.
With the COVID thing happening, as it made its way, we had our buddy Josh in Seattle giving us like an early heads up on that stuff. But we got to see it move, and we got to see the jurisdictional lockdown happen. And it was predictable enough that if you were following it, even though it happened quickly, you could adapt to it. And if you had a mobile rig and you knew where you wanted to go, like you thought about it ahead of time, there was enough time to load up and roll out. We got Rick on the line. I'm going to bring him on. Rick, you are on.
Hello?
What's going on?
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Hey, it's good to talk to you guys again. This is really interesting to me, this idea of that mobile life or the nomad lifestyle. Because we were talking about it, I think last week, I was talking about getting a small piece of land. That's kind of like what just Michael was just saying, get a small piece of junk property that is out away from any of the cities or jurisdictions where they're going to have these property taxes and such, or minimal property taxes. At the least, you don't have to develop it. It's just basically to set up your residency, and then you travel. And there are nomadic groups in the United States. They do this regularly. They YouTube on a regular basis, and I've been looking at them for the last year or so because there's this one guy named Bill Allen he actually raised his kids in Anchorage. And that's what he does now. He's got one of the biggest YouTube audiences out there. He does this thing called the RTR. It's basically a retreat for nomads, people who travel in their mobile homes or RVs or trailer, camper trailers, whatever, tents, like Josh was saying with this bandana on his stick. All kinds of people come from all over the U.S. to go to these things. And a lot of these people, what they do is they have the home base, so that way they can go back there and, get, like a lot of them will sign up for, that's where their medical is through and stuff like that. So they have to go back to that home base in order to like do their dental and stuff like that. So
if I can jump in there for 1 second, one of the downsides I've had is mail and residency.
That's what I was just about to mention.
Yeah,
that's just about what I was going to mention. You can do mail forwarding, and there are businesses that do that. And it costs you you pay them to do that, of course. But what they do is you just use them as a mail delivery service, and then they just stock it up. And then when you come back into town, you just pick it up from them, or they will, if you go to another place, like, say you go to a family member's, you can have it forwarded to there, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways to get around that, that are not that difficult. And from everything, I mean, these are people, they're living on $500 a month, $600 a month, and making it just fine. And a lot of them, as David was saying, have a mobile business. They stay within range of of internet, and then they could, like some of them are CPAs or something like that. They do bookkeeping, things like that for the people around. Some of them do it for people around the world because of the systems we have now. So one of the things I was going to mention is that you were talking about tiny houses. Well, one of the things I've really been looking at is buying a cargo trailer and then outfitting it to my own, insulating it and outfitting it to my own needs.
Reefer vans are they're pre-insulated and pre-cooled.
Which is that?
Refrigerated van trailers or refrigerated box trucks. They already have the insulation.
Well, the thing, I don't know. I don't know anything about those, but I do know that you can get a cargo trailer brand new for about $3,000, and then once it's outfitted and everything, I mean, as a mobile home, and you're not putting in, hardly anybody does black water systems. They'll have a gray water maybe, but most people do avoid that because it's such a hassle. And the thing about the cargo trailers is they last forever. Like RVs and stuff like that, and your camper trailers, the roofs are always suspect. You're always having problems with those. They're poorly built in most cases and very expensive.
Slide outs break a lot.
Oh yeah. Those things. Yeah, I would never buy one of those. But with the cargo trailer, I can insulate it relatively cheaply. I can have I can put my own windows in it, and you'll never have problems with the roof on that. And the thing about the cargo trailers is that they don't lose their value, which is one of the reasons why you're better off buying a new one in most cases, because they hold their value so well. And anyway, that's just one of the things. I've seen people living in Teslas on this YouTube channel, and doing really well.
Well, they got a fast car.
Well, and here's the thing, Josh.
That
they have
helps
power for everything. They have an electric generator, underneath them.
Reefer vans.
So they
Corey
can
brought
power
up
all the stuff they need to.
the reefer vans too. They're not just fridge units; they're temperature control units. So, like if you're in Fairbanks in January hauling fresh produce to the North Slope, you don't want it to freeze. So, you can warm it up. They get warm too. They're not just refrigeration.
Right.
So you can have your own climate controlled trailer house.
I wonder what the efficiency of it is, because most people down in the States, they just use a big buddy heater, or those little buddies or whatever they are.
They're fairly efficient. They're fairly efficient if you look at the size of the fuel tanks. You can kind of see what the efficiency is, because they're made to, you don't want to. They're not made to have to keep stopping and refill while you're making a cross country delivery. So they're pretty efficient. They're usually, especially if they have those new Albassos, they'll last they burn forever. Everything you need.
And how big are these trailers we're talking about? These reefer trailers?
Anywhere from
any size
20 to 53.
Yeah. I've seen vans, insulated vans. I was buying some grass-fed beef in Reno, and it came in just like a little Sprinter van that was all set up as a reefer unit.
Plus, if you get the right truck to pull it around, you can have a 600 horsepower motorhome instead of just some Girl Scout 150
Yeah, so
pusher.
this is something David and I were talking about. If you have an office or a home office in a van trailer, you start to run into, okay, well, now you got to buy a tractor trailer instead of a Cummins truck or a Ford. And then you need a CDL, and then you need, certs for crossing borders because you look commercial and all this stuff.
Right.
And there are freight services where you put out a bid for moving cargo, either partial loads or a full load. And once you post that, it goes on, and trucks that are already moving from those areas can pick you up on a backhaul run. And that's one way that you could get your home moved around. It would cost more per trip, but you wouldn't have to maintain your truck and pay insurance and all that.
Right. Well, the thing about that is, where are you going to? I mean, most of the nomads that I see, like in the summertime, they live in the national parks and stuff, or they go places where they do what's called boondocking, where you live off the grid, basically.
2 weeks at a time.
Yeah. And then you go in, to town or whatever and resupply, or if you happen to have a black water system, you might need to empty it and replenish it. Replenish your waters and stuff like that.
I guess I was thinking more if you have properties.
What's that?
I was thinking more if you have land in several places, you'd be moving from property to property.
Oh, well, that's a possibility, I suppose.
What's great about this is it's a distributed search. A lot of people are working on this, and they're coming up with everything from living in vans or Teslas to flying around to different places. And so it's a distributed search for a distributed lifestyle.
Right. And a lot of the size of these mini homes dependencies, like Leela was saying online, depends on how big your family is. If it's just you, you can live in a van, no problem, or a Tesla. But you can have problems if you have a spouse and kids and stuff like that.
Yeah, when I was in, I guess, late elementary school, my family, which I was only child, but we lived on a boat in Valdez, 38-foot cabin cruiser boat, and it got a little small in the winter, and we had 2 cats and a dog, and but it was a great experience. I always look back on that with great memories.
Yeah, you probably learned how to organize well too. Yeah,
or deal with a high level of chaos. So.
Yeah. So, and on a related subject with that, because we were talking about last time, selling off your properties, and you were just talking about that too, about not wanting to be held down by a big house or something like that. And, I just heard, it was yesterday or the day before, that Justin Trudeau came out with this deal that Canada will not return to normal until a vaccine is developed and everybody has it or whatever. And I was thinking, that could be a long time before they ever open the Canadian border up again. And that's what worries me. David, are you able to travel between Canada and Alaska now?
Yeah, I think I could have anyway. And there's all sorts of exceptions. I actually had a talk with my immigration lady yesterday, and there's all sorts of exceptions. So it's it appears that there's many ways to cross.
Okay. That's one thing that concerned me is that if I had a bunch of property, how would I get it across, or what I had left of my property, how would I get it across the border without flying?
Yeah, well,
we're kind of isolated here.
Could you pass through? I think you would have a hard time. I think if you were in Alaska and you wanted to drive through Canada to get to the States, I think you would have a hard time. I have a Canadian and a U.S. passport, so neither border can refuse me.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, when you cross, different ones have different rules. Like when I cross into Alaska, they're probably going to ask me to sign the mandated 14-day thing that's not actually, mandated. Coming into Canada, I think it actually is mandated.
Probably not the time to bring that up.
Probably not the time.
Or maybe it is. I don't know.
Who knows? But they can't refuse you. And then there's exemptions for other people crossing. If you cross with a spouse who's a non-citizen, but you have proof of marriage, they can't refuse that either. So there's holes. The system always has leaks.
And there's also barges, which are expensive because of Jones Act, but we've already covered that.
Oh, for getting to USA, yeah, from Alaska, yeah. But I mean, that's the whole thing. That's the have your land. Land is like the minimum thing you can have somewhere, to be able to go there with some stability. But you won't be able to transport it.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the things that I've done is I have a shipping container office in Reno, and actually I have a link for some of my build blogs on that. And then I have kind of a little shop set up here in Fairbanks, and I have 3D printers in both, and I have basically the same set of tools, and there's a small number of things that I move back and forth. So I've had to kind of pare down what I use as normal tools, and it costs twice as much, but it also keeps me from it costs twice as much because I have to keep a duplicate set in each location where I do this, but it also keeps me from accumulating too much.
Well,
If
go ahead. Sorry.
If you had like the van thing or a RV or a trailer or something that was kitted out for work, you would need to have two sets of tools everywhere.
Oh, somebody just asked a good question. Curious, what stuff is worth holding on to? This is Meat Tornado. Reminds me of the monkeys and the coconut traps.
Yeah, there's an apocryphal or not story about if you have a bottle with a small opening and you put something desirable to a monkey in there, it'll jimmy its hand through the opening and grab the stuff, and then when it tries to pull its hand back, it won't be able to get it out of the bottle, and it wants the thing in the bottle so bad that it'll be stuck to the tree. If you screw the bottle to the tree or whatever, it'll just stick there and you can walk right up to him. People
and I think right, the answer for that is answer to that is going to be different for everyone, but
right,
it depends what you're doing. And I think as you move your stuff around more, you start to appreciate it less, so it's easier to let go of.
Right. Yeah, I agree. That I have a bunch of stuff that I would easily get rid of or be able to let go of. But then there are other things. It's like that are, I've had them for a long time. They're better quality. They're things that I don't want to replace, and but I need them for lifestyle, etc. Like for instance, I've got an amount of long-term food supplies that right now you can't get, and I just can't see just liquidating those. I would want to take them with me, and if possible, and probably the same thing goes for like a lot of my rifles and stuff like that. I don't want those. I don't want to sell those. Those are some of those I've had since I was a kid.
Near and dear.
Yeah,
near and dear, Rick. They're near and
right,
dear.
and
they're very
this,
near and dear.
This is the type of stuff that you can keep on property, but I find that there's some stuff I have in Fairbanks that I might look at once every 2 years or something. And I know it's always here. It's on property somewhere. And, but I don't need access to it all the time.
So I want to throw a little, I'm not going to call it a wrench, but so I'm thinking about this a little bit, and I'm thinking about how do I structure this? So humanity kind of did this already at a certain point. There was, let's say, the American Indians, right? They're a great example of, at least on the plains, they followed the herds around. That's how they lived. That's why they had the teepees, quick up, quick down. We'll follow the herds. We sustain ourselves off the herds. We follow the herds. We follow the herds. And sometimes, or at least the Europeans who did the same thing, figured out the herds are depleting, or we can't keep up with the herds. Well, we keep leaving half our children along the trail while we're chasing these herds. So they decided we might be better off if we plant ourselves right here and bring the herds to us and develop a little community here and sustain ourselves with some, if we can't rely solely on these herd animals that we've been following for hundreds of years, how can we sustain ourselves? Well, with crops. And then the meat was more of a filler. It wasn't the total necessity to sustain themselves. And I'm wondering if there's a balance here. Let's say the market is our herd that we're following, right? So as long as there's a somewhat stable trade going on and everything, while you're traveling to these different places, you're kind of following the herd. You can still sustain yourself from what's available. But if, let's just say, a real poop hits the fan scenario, and there's no market like anything we've known. There always will be, of course, but the market as we know it, which probably is true, is gone, and traveling sustainability is gone. Is there a point where you just say, crap, what are we going to do? Let's plant right here. And I mean, literally, plant ourselves, plant our whatever community, plant food. You know what I mean? When does the time come where it's hunkered down for survival instead of, I think there is a point between the two. Yeah. Where you can sustain yourself, or you have a little bit of, and I don't know, maybe it's a weaker way to look at it because you're not taking a risk, but sometimes, especially if you have families, the risk isn't worth it. Sometimes the risk is, I know if I plant here, we'll survive the next year or two. Whereas if I move over here, what's there to sustain me once I get there? Kind of like the Indians chasing the herd. Just
right.
Talk about.
I just don't know. My personal feeling is on that, that if it comes down to where every individual that's going to survive has to plant a crop and live off of that, there's going to be a crap load of people die. A crap load. So, if that's the case, I don't know that there's, there'll be some survivors. I won't be one of them. I'm too damn old. That'll be, and that's the whole thing for me. As far as that's why I was looking at things like the nomadic lifestyle, because I can live very cheaply and survive, and it's not too terribly difficult, as far as lifestyle goes. But putting in 16 hours a day on a farm is not something I don't know that I can physically do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying, 80-year-olds walk 12 miles a day. It's like, well, I don't. But I do quite a bit of walk. I mean, more than the average amount of snowshoeing, but still, I don't know about sustaining, that type of lifestyle, the physicality of it. I went out this weekend and cracked my ribs good, and it's like, oh boy, just one little injury. Mm-hmm. and in that kind of a
Yeah.
circumstance, whew, man, can't imagine.
Well,
So
then again, Rick, if you think about it, we're not. I think when we think about that kind of a lifestyle, if we have to feed ourselves, we're all going to die. Part of that comes with what we know from history, right? Because we read Little House on the Prairie, so we saw how hard it was. But they also were living with really primitive implements at the time. We have an advantage where even if much technology is taken from us in planning, harvesting, stuff like that, we still have a lot more technology than they did. And we can go down several steps and be way ahead of Charles Ingalls. You know what I mean? We have.
well,
We do. We
that's why I put a
have the
couple of weeks
implements. We
ago
have
in
the
the comments. I said Alaskan Buddha was asking about are there any tractors for sale, and I said anybody got a mule? You know, it's like that's right. You know, part of that goes into this whole peak oil thing and what has happened with our oil now. You know, I guess it's fortunate that we have this low oil prices because it makes it much easier to be mobile if that's the case. You know, money wise, but there are several people that I read that are of the persuasion that fracking is done, and that it was done sometime before this whole thing came around. They were already, you know, in the red constantly, and that, you know, they believe peak oil, you know, occurred some time ago, and that what we're seeing is really kind of the end of that whole industrial revolution, etc., and that this is their way of covering it up, you know, with these virus scares, you know, in the economy, etc.
But even if you look at the oil glut, Rick, if you look at the oil glut, that's actually it actually can work to our benefit too, because we know that if anything, Charles Ingalls didn't have oil energy that he could tap into, and we have an overabundance. Even in really bad times in different, you know, if there's a whole different economy, I think that oil's so abundant, it'll still be available in one form or another, which just makes, again, we could have a lot better lifestyle with a lot less technology than the Ingalls family did. I think a lot more people would survive than what we normally think.
Another thing, you know, the Ingalls family, they were farming 40 acres and larger plots to sell the crops.
Right.
It was their livelihood, not just what they produced food with. So you don't need an 80-acre farm to be farming to produce your food supply.
Well, I've been thinking about that too, Mike, and I think people that have 80-acre farms, you know, there's different ways they can go about to farming the whole thing. If labor is a shortage, you just lease out part of your acres. Do enough to what you can handle yourself, plus more if you want to sell some, because obviously produce is going to be pretty valuable if things go the way they're tracking. And then lease out the other 70 or 75 acres, and then have them pay you in 20% of their produce. And you can use that to sell. I mean, there's so many different ways that'd be like a co-op farm, I guess, but there's so many different ways. Look at even here, I've got a 5-acre plot that's doing nothing. If I wanted to, if I really thought might be something that could happen, we'd be over there tilling that sucker down and get 4 other families and say, okay, we're going to get this 1.5 acres. You guys can have these other acres, but the deal is we get 20% of whatever you farm or something like that. Who knows? We just got to think different. I mean, I don't think we're hosed in any situation outside of all-out nuclear war.
Yeah. Well, I don't think. Yeah, I agree. We're not hosed per se. because who can predict the future as far as that goes? Other than that, it looks like it's going to get worse as far as government crackdowns and such go, and which is going to make all of those things more difficult to some degree. And whether you'll be able to do that, kind of like what you were talking about earlier with the freedom ships, etc. If you have too big of a what do I want to say, a combine or whatever, a group, they're going to center on you. So,
with that libertarian ship, first of all, is all the libertarian wealth combined even going to hit $1 billion, much less 5? And if we're talking real libertarians, a 2-mile ship, that probably gives each libertarian an acre's worth of land on that ship.
Yeah.
So there's not that many, really. I wasn't trying to hijack the traveling, the nomad thing either. I was loving listening to it. I just wanting to throw the other side of it in too.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point, and I think if we're to the point where everyone's growing their own food, like that's a very different scenario. What we're talking about is being able to live and work and make goods while not being tied to one physical location, and then trade those goods for food and other necessities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I don't think it's going to be a complete. Everyone has to grow their own. But I think we could see something towards that, and it might even be more efficient. Is why we go somewhere along those lines. And
this doesn't, like, nothing works if everybody's mobile. You need, and the majority of people are going to be stationary. If everybody's moving, then that doesn't work. But I think the point that's being made is you don't have to be stationary, and you can be mobile and not starve to death. So.
Yeah,
and that was my original idea, was to transition from where I am now into a nomadic lifestyle in order to explore and possibly find someplace that I like, down in the lower 40. I'm just not that familiar with the lower 48 to go, I think I'll buy a plot of land here,
you got to go try it
that's
out.
where the other thing I was looking at. Yeah, and that way you can drive around a bit, stay here, stay there, see what you like, see if there's people you like there, that type of thing. See if the culture is, like one of the things to me, my wife and I at one time were looking at Utah, and it's like, just don't like the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the culture there. That predominantly Mormon culture. I like Mormon people. They seem like decent people, but there's a whole culture there that just pervades that whole thing.
I'm guessing you're not part of it.
No, I'm not part of that, and so I'm in the minority by far there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of going to a place and just getting the feel for it. Like, you can't.
Right.
It's not something you can explain or really talk about. It's just how do I feel while I'm in this place, and sometimes that takes a while to digest, and you got to leave to compare it to something else, and you get the answer after months later.
Right. Well, Corey, you said you had a container down in Nevada?
Yeah. Just a little 20-footer.
And so you have it on a piece of property that are you paying property taxes on that?
I have it at a friend has commercial property, kind of right in Reno. So it's parked there.
Okay.
And it's just an office. There's no big utilities or anything in it. It's just part of it's storage, and then it's got some desks and computer and basic tools and stuff like that. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're not. Yeah. So basically, you're you working with your friend or whatever. So you're not having to.
Right. I have some
set up all those legal ties.
right. I have some property in her family's got some property in Southern California on the east side, and that's another place I could always put it on a truck and stick it there.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have run through that. I just thought that was you guys were talking about really what I would call the nomadic lifestyle, and I've been kind of enamored with that for a little while.
Think almost by definition, there's no formula for what we're talking about.
Right.
And that's kind of part of the decentralization and why the freedom ship doesn't work. It's like everybody's got to go try it out and find their own thing.
Yeah, and I guess for me, one of my core objectives in doing all this is I want to find a way to never again, at some point where I can get to this, never pay Uncle Sam another dime, and never fund another war in my life, and just help to starve the beast.
That is one of the things you can accomplish. I mean, there's downsides, there's upsides and downsides.
Yeah.
But that one's pretty easy. That one's pretty easy to accomplish.
Yeah.
North America is not the best for this, right? Because you don't have enough jurisdictions. But if you had a little plot in Juarez or, Tijuana or something like that, and you could do consulting or whatever, or even, small scale manufacturing or whatever, but you could do it from your trailer. You just do your business activity from there, finish your orders for your customers for 6 months, and then cruise back into the States. Piece of cake. File your taxes with the Mexican government, fill out your FBAR, give it to the IRS. If you're smart, you won't pay yourself more than the foreign income allowance every year. There's no reason to do it. It's like $110,000. There's no reason to pay yourself more than that personally.
Especially if you're living cheap.
Yeah, especially if you're living cheap. Or here's another angle on it. I have property in Alaska. I have property in Canada here. My property in Alaska, I rent out, and I pay bed tax to the borough and all that jazz. I run a loss on it. It's not a huge loss, but it's a small loss. Like after the mortgage and the utilities and everything, runs a small loss. It basically pays for itself. But until it breaks even, I don't have any tax liability there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And break even on property is the real deal,
So are you able to keep it rented? I mean, you're not having any troubles with that or anything? As far as
no, I got a guy in there now. He got COVID stranded.
Oh, I remember you telling that story. The guy that
Yep.
Yeah.
And people are starting to line up. For I have through Airbnb, I got people for June and people for July already.
Really?
Not
So
a lot.
Airbnb,
But some.
I had heard that I thought Airbnb was shut down. Is that not true?
No, their policies got relaxed to the point where nobody could enforce anything. Anybody could cancel on anybody without any repercussions. So the risk of using it, got really high. But I got people lining up for summer. Like people are ready for this to be over.
It'd be interesting to see what the rentals are like in cities versus rural areas like Fairbanks.
Oh, after all this shakes down.
Yeah, if people are traveling, if they're renting places outside, like VRBO style long-term rental to get out of the cities.
Yeah, that could be. A lot of people probably just want to. I mean, there will probably be a lot of people who go on vacation just to get out of where they are. Mm-hmm. But that's another angle to the transient thing. The transient thing doesn't mean you don't own anything necessarily, right? But it means that you're right. Corey he put it the best that I've ever heard it put. And it's exactly the way I felt after I moved. Fairbanks is a great place to live if it's not your only option.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that statement. And I didn't sell my property there. Maybe I should have, but I could if I wanted to, or I could sell my property here, right? And I'm not homeless in either case.
Right. Well, that's one of the things. I was reading an article by Bill Sardi, and he was talking about that. He says, think about renting or leasing your home, and then move to where the cost of living is much lower.
Yeah, and then rent the one that's expensive.
Exactly.
Which is similar to you can't sell if your housing price goes up and you sell, you can't buy another house in the same area and make any money. You have to move away from where the value is.
Right, because it's generally increasing if you're getting a gain on your property.
You'd be selling and buying into the same market, so it doesn't work.
Correct. Yeah. But yeah, the point being that, in this market with, there's not a high demand for houses right now. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, I guess, according to this, falling through the floor, and not expecting home values to rise for a while now because of this whole thing. And there
is an interesting, there are all sorts of forces. And sometimes you can play it, sometimes you can't. My house in Fairbanks would probably be a bad time to sell it, So I think I'm kind of stuck with it for now. But we know
bad time to sell it. Why? Because of the situation, right?
The sale price,
not just because of our real estate market.
Many factors, but the real estate market in Fairbanks is one. I think it would have been better to have sold it a year ago if I wanted to sell it. But who knows? Who knows what price inflation is going to do? But one thing that I got a friend in Fairbanks who has 9 rentals, and then another friend in Fairbanks who, he's got a bunch, 30 units or something. The guy with 30 units, he's actually he's building property right now. He's building bottom of the market rental property. And his comment to me was, when the market turns south, people who, bought more than people who adopted a lifestyle they couldn't sustain have to restructure. And they usually end up like Chena Ridge. Imagine Chena Ridge. People move out of Chena Ridge. And often when they move out, they split up because their relationship was based on materialism or whatever. And so you'll go from one home being occupied to 2 rentals being occupied. So he's building nice bottom of the market rentals. And he did this in 08, 09 and made money on it. He said the bottom of the market fills up when there's a recession because everybody needs a place to stay. And the top of the market has to restructure. So people move out of the top. And then my buddy's got 8 or 9 rentals. Their dry cabin, they're $300-400 a month. He's never had large vacancy, no matter how bad the housing market is.
Yeah, my son just bought a deal like that, a bunch of dry cabins together, on out on, I think, Goldstream Road or something like that. But yeah, it's that same type of thing. He's always got people in there.
Yeah.
That's going to be impacted by. Go ahead.
How much will be? It probably won't be impacted, right? That's the thing. You can't. When there's a recession, you only have one option in the direction you go, which is to save more money, to spend less.
People always need a place to live.
Right.
Yeah, the bottom of the market is it's a safe place to be. It's a boring place to be. You're never going to become. Well, actually, that's not true. You can easily become a millionaire, but you got to commit to it for 20 or 30 years. You're not going to flip a dry cabin, and make $1 million flipping it. But it's going to be occupied. So there's stuff like that. And if you're moving around between places, if you got a couple places you like, and you have a place at each one, you can rent them. That is an option, or Airbnb them or whatever. So there's a few ways to play that. It's real work though. It's real work. Everybody on this show has helped me tremendously with my rental in Alaska. I would not have been able to do it otherwise.
Well, and that's a lot of it because you're not there, so somebody else steps in to help you or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, when you're at another location, remote location, whatever. Because that's the thing is somebody has to maintain that rental if there's something goes wrong or. You know,
Yeah, you helped out. You helped out with that. Yeah, you cleared a bunch of brush up there for me. I mean, that's just amazing.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
Well, it was fun. You know, I enjoy doing stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's cool. I appreciate it. And then we got you know, a nameless caller who was up there staying for a while and painted the place. Like that was our deal. He stayed there for a couple months and painted it and got to stay there. And anytime anybody wants to go back, you know, anytime somebody wants in there, like, you know, shoot me an email. So anyway,
And-
there's ways you can do it without being homeless or being stuck in a trailer or something.
Yeah, and I think it's important that the being nomadic or whatever doesn't come at the expense of having a community. And there's always opportunities for reciprocity where, you know, wherever your friends are, you have a place to go as well if the place that you're in becomes unfriendly or something. So it's
well, you know, Corey,
the community as well can be distributed.
That is exactly right. And one of the things at least through the YouTubes that I've watched, you know, the videos that I subscribe to on that, the nomadic community is actually pretty tight.
Mm-hmm.
They help each other out continuously. Like this guy, this Bill Allen I was talking about, he has a site now where if you're, you know, having real troubles financially, etc., say you're living in a tent and you're wanting to be nomadic, they take donations, you know, you give them $1, whatever, and they take that and they have somebody donate them like a little RV or a camper, like a Volkswagen camper or something, and then they'll completely re-outfit that for nomadic lifestyle and set it up so that, and then donate that to the person. That's one of the things they do, you know, and then like I say, they have this RTR that's an annual gathering of all the different nomads. They usually gather down in Arizona, you know, someplace like that. In the spring, you know, that type of thing. And so they, you know, and then from there, the nomads, you know, like they'll get in a group, they'll bunch up in groups, you know, with people you meet and friends, and then they travel together, you know, safety in numbers, that type of thing.
Yep.
But there's definitely a closeness there that I really like, you know, that there is a big community of nomads like that.
Yeah.
We've been talking about making Acapulco, Mexico, our gathering location.
Yeah. Just because of the anarcho.
It'd be fun to show up. It'd be fun to show up down there and have, you know, something semi-cohesive. Like that's the thing. There's a lot of these. There's a million fragmented, you know, communities of people doing this,
right.
but there are some that are cohesive, and having it be cohesive and not dogmatic. You know, you don't have to be on the road all the time or whatever. It's just something you can do. Could be really neat. Right.
Mm-hmm. And that's what these people do too. You know, you're not obligated to travel with them, or if you feel like, hey, this is getting too cloistered for me, I don't like this, you just get in your vehicle and drive away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, go somewhere else for a while.
Can't do that if you're stuck on a freedom ship.
That's for sure. Turn this ship around.
You know, Rick,
a boat full of libertarians goes nowhere. It just on the map.
It ends up just breaking into 1,000 pieces from the forces pulling away from each other.
Everybody runs off with their chunk of steel.
It would be funny if you built it that way so that you could do that. So I'm pissed at you. I'm taking my chunk.
You could just dump a bunch of steel in the ocean and everyone owns shares to it. And it's down there.
Well, that's good.
Well, no, that's the Walter Block advocates that, you know, that everything be privatized, including the ocean.
Yeah. Rick, you know, a lot of what
exactly
you're talking about, and always kind of a theme I get from you, anyways. Even a nomadic lifestyle or whatever is the community aspect, the need for community slash family, maybe community ties.
I
think
just
that's
believe no man is an
we're
island.
seeing how important it is, right? I wonder, what do you guys think real world right now with? Am I echoing just to me?
Just a little bit. It's fine though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Making sure it wasn't my speakers. So what do we think about this moving a little bit? For one, I think it's shown it might be a little bit important to have a spot you can hunker down for a time like this. Anyways, I mean, they told you have to your shelter in place, shelter at home. Now we're looking at the contact tracing apps.
Oh yeah.
What they're going to use that? Are they? How are they going to use that as far as travel restrictions? The traceable vaccines that they're talking about. What do you guys think? How will that disrupt what we're talking about with, living a more transient lifestyle, being able to, reality too is the states, it looks like at least they're planning on restricting it even more unless you have your papers.
Yeah,
how do you guys think that'll affect
I think
everything?
it's always going to hit airplanes first and harder. So if you're on the ground, that will always be the easiest way to travel.
I agree.
Yeah,
But that goes back to that thing. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, jump in, Rick.
I was just going to say that goes back to that deal we were talking about as far as getting through Canada. I'm pretty sure by the time they do open up the borders, you'll have to have that vaccine to get through. That'll be one of their stipulations.
Yeah, that I don't know. I don't know about that. Like a lot of Alaskans, a lot of Americans cross the border. The Canadian-U.S. border is, I think it's the biggest border in trade volume globally.
I'm just going to do a plug for my birch syrup and my coffee here.
Surreptitiously pouring it in. Where can people buy that? Can they buy overpriced gold from you as well? So the trade board, like the Detroit-Windsor crossing is, I don't know, it's like the busiest truck crossing in terms of volume and dollar amount in the world or something like that.
Okay.
And so it's the reality of that border is that it's leaky. And I don't know what policy they're going to try to enact, but they're never able to enact anything without harmonizing it with the states. And it's funny because when people in the states were freaking out about, well, Becky Akers did it. She's like, they're fining people $300,000 for violating their 14-day dealio in Canada. Well, I know a bunch of people who came back. I know 0 people who paid a $300,000 fine. And it's funny because Americans will get whipped up about what's happening here, and Canadians get incredibly whipped up about what's happening in the States, and neither of them pay attention to what's happening in their own jurisdiction. So right. I don't think that, like Herr Trudeau, you made your comment about his statement. He won't be able to do that unless the U.S. does it too. It'll have to be harmonized.
Well, and I wonder if that's not the entire plan, because I just heard last night before I went to bed, I read an article saying that Trump had pivoted to Fauci on mandatory vaccines. So, they're kind of in lockstep on that, if that's the case, because you know how Trump waffles, he goes back and forth. So, and who knows how true that really is or not, it's just what I'm reading. But if that's the case, then, they'll be in lockstep on that. And that's kind of where that whole thing with Bill Gates and all that, getting the little dye thing and with the vaccine that, you put under an ultraviolet light and they can read your, whether you've been vaccinated, et cetera, what your record is, whether you're a good citizen or not, that type of thing.
And they, that already exists. That already exists to some extent. This is just another layer. Like when you cross the border now, they pull up your criminal record.
Yeah, when I was
Sure.
going to school in Reno, I had to chase down my old shot records and update and get vaccines and stuff. So, like, it's already done in paper form if you want to participate in certain systems.
Like
There's a-
like what do you mean? I'm not sure.
Oh, like
So you
I had to do that to go to college in Nevada.
oh, okay.
I had to have my shot record, which I had to get it from the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District, and then update it with the boosters that had expired, and then I had to submit that with my application to the school.
Well, and see, that's kind of the way I see that they'll do this. They'll make it, when they say a mandatory vaccine, they'll say, well, you don't have to opt into the vaccine, but you won't be able to fly. You won't be able to come across our border. You won't be able to, come in our grocery store, whatever the case may be. But you're free not to have the vaccine.
Right. So are you willing to forego those things that are offered, and can you find alternatives to them through your community and your lifestyle?
Well, that's what I think you're going to have to develop, a good black market system.
Well, it doesn't
around
necessarily have to be black market. It's just something else. And the better that you make that, the more you're helping other people by exploring those options and creating options for them.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to what David was saying earlier about using technology to kind of stay one step ahead of that.
Yeah.
That's what they do is they lock down all the avenues that you have to escape, so that you have to do it. You have to comply or die, basically. That's what if you're living a traditional lifestyle, or even say that nomadic lifestyle, they could stop you from. What was it? I was reading that one New Mexico town, the mayor locked down all roads going out of the town or into the town.
Probably
total isolation for the entire town.
That probably didn't come as a surprise to anybody who knew the mayor, though. And that's the thing. Like, if you're gonna travel, you got to know what you're getting into. Just like if you're gonna stay somewhere. I mean, a lot of this stuff is the same. A lot of the stuff is the same. You gotta know what environment you're living in. Josh's point is very interesting, and you touched on it a little bit, Rick, which was in a world where this stuff continues to escalate. Which, if we think back to 20 years ago and then we think to today, it looks like that's continuing to escalate. When does it get to the point where you can't really go anywhere? Well, who knows? I mean, could be not very long from now. So then, the reason to have the mobile place isn't to move around between places here; it's to leave and potentially not come back. I mean, ultimately, that's what I'm talking about. I don't know what other people are talking about, but ultimately, that's what I'm talking about: is not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And the more people who do that,
ultimately for me too,
and have a positive story to tell about how to do that, because that's a daunting thing to even have enter your mind. The more people that do that and show that it's safe, the better, the easier it is for everyone else.
And there's a balancing act there to look at the economic decline occurring, resulting in an authoritarian crackdown. The economic decline is going to cause more people to become more gypsy-like, because they're just not going to have the money to stay in a large house. They can't get a mortgage. They can't make the down payment. They become more gypsy-like. That makes them harder for the state to keep track of. Now they don't have a permanent address for the state to send a SWAT team out to. And so the economic decline caused by the state is resulting in the state causing it more difficult to keep track of their own herd. So this is the complex balancing act that will lead to what comes up in the next decade. So I don't see us going into into this global tyrannical world government that's going to last for some undetermined amount of time. It's not going to last because market forces are going to cause it to crash, because people aren't just going to sit around like they would like us to in Agenda 21 and wait for us to get fed Soylent Green and just become part of the human zoo. It's not going to happen that way.
Garden walls are permeable. That's this
Mhm.
thing Jonathan Peugeot talks about all the time. Is that I mean, and he actually talks about that with the story of the Garden of Eden too. Like you have this perfect garden, but there's a serpent in it, and there's symbolism there, which is that if you make something totally sealed, it is sterile and it dies.
Mhm.
And if you have some, yep,
Or the thing that you're trying to keep out arises within you.
sure, right, and then you can't cast it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a really good point, Mike. And that's kind of the irony of the lockdown, is that it creates the instability that makes the lockdown harder.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be, my opinion, a lot of this is going to be good for humanity, in that earlier we were talking about the brain needing to be outside, having physical activity. Humans are designed to travel miles and miles a day, and that's not what our society is currently structured around. Our society is currently structured around sit in a chair like I'm doing right now for 12 hours a day, and walk as little as you can, and eat as much garbage as you can too. And that's going to go away. So humans will become physically superior compared to what they are now, as long as they survive, I guess. And so you're not going to have, you may not have kids sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day, unable to learn. Now they get to go out and they get to farm their own food in their garden. They get to learn vertical farming. They get to learn how to set up solar systems. The fact that the support structure is collapsing is going to cause people to learn how to be more independent, where they no longer have to rely on the state.
My friend in Reno has a farm, and I've helped out on it, and tromping around in the woods collecting birch water. Like I can't tell you how good it feels to be outside doing stuff and not sitting at a desk or on the couch or something. And it really activates a different part of your brain, and it feels good.
It does, yeah. And even the sleep is better.
Yeah, and our society tells us that that's not the right thing, or it's looked down on, or it's manual labor or whatever. But and it's hard in a lot of ways. So I'm not romanticizing it, but I think it needs to be part of one's life.
Yeah, and it's like the saying goes that necessity is the mother of invention. Society, people don't have that much need, and so you enter a time when you need something. Then you see the period of great invention, like the Great Depression. You saw tractors coming into use rather than being pulled by mules. So I think we'll end up seeing that. And the authoritarian.
Yeah, that's always the.
Yeah, the authoritarian state that we see coming in is just it's a trigger. It's an indication of times that we're in, and so I don't think it's all bad. I guess it's something that's been needed, but it's not something that we want to see coming. We'd rather do it on our own, but I guess we need a push, right? It's not what they intend. It's not what the state wants, but it's what they get.
Yeah.
When you said that about we'll be in better shape, or better, because there won't be you won't have all these junk foods, etc., available. That brought to mind that when I was reading recently here, rereading Discovery of Freedom. One of the things she talks about in there is how through history people have always been hungry. And that's why they were in such good shape, because they were starving to death all the time and working their butts off, 16 hours a day or more, and then trying to survive, just trying to put food on the table. No leisure time, really, very little leisure time, if any. And so, that's what, I don't look forward to that at all.
Yeah. Well, there's
if,
also,
if in fact that is where we're going.
yeah, and there's also the theory that a not a starvation diet, but a low calorie diet will result in you living longer.
Mm-hmm. And intermittent fasting and cell apoptosis and all of that.
Right.
Right. I've seen Bill Sardi's articles on those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well,
the
I
junk
know-
food
Yeah,
is
he
going
talked-
to be.
At least for me, the shutdown has not led to a low calorie diet. So.
No, in
Wow.
fact, I think that's what it's designed to, is to increase that high calorie diet. You can order in pizza all day long.
Right.
Well, it may be harder to get some of the junk food. I saw McDonald's is the first fast food, nationwide fast food joint that is going to start not hoarding, but they're
Rationing.
going to be rationing. Thank you. They're rationing their meat. So the different
mean?
chains aren't going to have extra patties sitting in the freezer. They're going to get exactly what they need until they have no more.
And they're out.
Who determines what they need?
Yeah.
Right.
But with meat supplies, I mean, it's a real deal. I think meat's going to be a problem. They're saying by second week of May, we'll see the first shortages.
I see YouTube videos right now where people are, they're saying their stores are out of meat now down in the States.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't see that up here yet, but down in the States they are. In Oklahoma and places like that.
Some of those big changes, we should move into that. You have been talking about the meat shortages and the price inflation being realized in food, Josh, and you've been sending out a bunch of links on that, and you were talking about that yesterday too. What's the deal with that?
Most of it, from what I can tell, it's just a lack of processing. Several of the processing plants have gotten large numbers of COVID-19 cases, and so several of them, I think it's nearly 30 processing plants throughout the United States now have closed.
Is
It's
there
a lot more than it was just a couple days ago. Sorry, Corey.
Is there an idea of, is it higher in meat processing facilities than in the general population?
Yeah, that seemed like everything I read seemed to tend to say that it was higher for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these packing plants are in with states that have high numbers. A lot of them are in the upper eastern states, Midwest eastern states. But Tyson Foods, which I didn't realize how much Tyson does more than chicken. They do a lot of beef and pork, but they've closed several of theirs. The largest pork packing plants or whatever, they've shut down 5 of their largest plants from it. And as of Wednesday, ranchers in America are required to cull 160,000 hogs a day. That's a lot.
What do you mean by cull?
Kill. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have so many hogs that the state's having them kill 160,000 a day on average. There's no room.
Across the
So I looked into that because I
US.
thought, what do you mean? Yeah. How is it that they have too many, don't you? Just well, there's a certain factor there where the pig is no longer good for processing to be edible, and they have another generation of pigs that need to come and be replaced in those pens. So it's not like the piglet just is born in a pen and he grows up to maturation right there in the same pen. They process into different pens along the line of where their maturity is before they're harvested. So if you have 3-month-old pigs that need to go into the 4 or 5-month-old, I don't know if it's that drastic, but there's no room. So we got to get rid of one of the lines. Well, they're getting rid of the last line, which is right now. But they also decided they're killing several thousand piglets a day, which they said will be about, I think, 5 to 6 months where we'll see that drop in the supply. And the cattle are the same thing. What's really, I don't know if it's cool. So if you have a live cow, prices have dropped to 60 cents a pound for that live cow. But if that cow's dead and available for processing, it's all of a sudden gone up 62% the cost of that cow. So it's up for on the hoof dead cow is worth as much as burger was 3 months ago.
Let me ask you this.
Sorry, Rick.
In regard to that, so they're found these under. They're saying, and I read that the reason was that all the restaurants are shut down, so they're not buying meat. Is that why? As far as you know, I mean that this is.
It's twofold. It's twofold. The one is the restaurants and the restaurants not buying the product, and also the processing plants are closed. They're just flat closed. There's been a total of 20 COVID-19 related deaths in the meat processing centers themselves, and they can't afford the liability. Now, a couple days ago, President Trump used the Truman Act to force the packing plants to open back up, but he's getting pushback by all of them are unionized, and they're all saying, heck no, you can't force our workers, which I thought was interesting. So he supposedly has the right to force the companies open. Does he have the right to force people into those factories if they don't want to go back to work?
I would think so. I mean, does he have the right? No, but does he have the law? Yeah.
Well, so far it hasn't. So far, the pushback has been we're not going back. And then with the companies, their pushback is: are you federal government going to be liable now for the litigation that comes up against us when one of our factory workers gets sick or dies?
Or do they get indemnified?
Right, because some states have already passing laws where people who die at work from businesses that have decided they'll stay open through lockdown stuff, they're already setting up laws of how much you can sue that company for a death, and some for sicknesses, because they didn't care about your safety when you went to work. So they're playing both sides of the game. We're not liable. You have to go to work. Oh, by the way, when they get sick, this is how much they can sue you for.
That's the inequality under the law. It's the breakdown of the rule of law. It's the same on the vaccine thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Well,
but
now,
we should see next week some serious shortages, supposedly, and then from there on. And it's not. I'm focusing on the meat, but Mike even talked about in Florida. There's plenty of stories in Florida where they're just tilling the whole crops into the ground.
Right.
But the meat part just bothers me just because the amount of animals. I mean, I like to hunt, but man, I can't believe it. They're killing millions, literally killing millions of chickens right now. They're destroying millions of eggs a day right now. And not just ones that go to stores to be eaten, consumed, but they're breaking the eggs that are right. They're breaking the eggs of future chicks, which will be the future meat that'll go to processing plants. So we're looking at a short-term and long-term shortage, and definitely I think we're looking at the price inflation that we've been talking about for about 2 months now. That's beef prices on the hoof now are the same prices that so it's dead, but it hasn't been processed. It costs the same as hamburger did 2 months ago.
So it'd be like going to Delta Meats, and buying a whole pig or something like that. You're going to pay. You're saying you're on the hoof prices now are what the processed stuff was before.
Yep. Right. And then on the other side of it, while the person has the animal and it's alive, it's not worth anything. It's literally not worth anything. Right. But once it's dead for processing, it's just really weird. A weird way that reality is weird in that instance.
Well, it makes sense, from an economic standpoint. The processing costs money, all those things. So the price of that product is going to have to increase at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Layla's
talking about.
I could definitely see that.
Layla's talking about potatoes, and I read a few stories about that too. I grew up in Idaho.
Why can't farmers sell to stores?
There's not enough usage with potatoes, and you have to think most of them. There's so many laws that prevent. There's so many laws that prevent farmer to market. Farmers don't sell the markets; they sell the processing plants. They sell to other factories that package, label, clean, put it in a bag. Even potatoes, it has to go in a bag. They don't put it in a bag. I used to work in that industry where I drove a truck and hauled 56,000 pounds of potatoes 10 times a day to Simplot processing plant where they made all of McDonald's French fries and Ore-Ida's hash browns. People aren't eating them now. And I remember we had a storage unit for potatoes. I'd say it's probably about 60 foot wide and maybe 200 foot long and about a 20-foot ceiling. And they would pack that thing. That was just from the field we lived next to. They'd pack that thing from the back all the way to the front to sell the next spring. And what they're having, like in Idaho, for this one of the stories that I saw, they're rotting inside of their storage containers. So a lot of people are just letting them. A lot of farmers are just saying, "Come get free potatoes. Come get it. Just get it out of it," because it's, when you go through the effort of doing that, it's got to be just horrible thinking about that rotting. I
just can't imagine. What do you do with all those? With all those carcasses and stuff? What do you do with that?
They're disking them.
What does that mean?
They're putting them in the ground, like disking them under. You can find some pictures. You can find some pictures online where there's like mountains, fields that are just dead pigs.
I saw that when they were dealing with the virus in China, and they were killing the pigs that had that swine flu or whatever, and then pushing them with bulldozers into these mass grave things, and it's like, oh my God, that's disgusting. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Might be some good soil to plant on in about 5 years, though. 3 years.
One thing I wonder is, for Americans, about close to 80% of their calories come from meat and animal products, but all that's going away, and they're also getting rid of the vegetables. So as the meat disappears, and they have to replace the calories with something. Well, they just plowed under all the vegetables. They plowed under all the potatoes, right? So what are they going to replace the calories with?
Corn.
Bread. Corn. Yeah.
Yeah. So
corn, actually, you're right, David, because it lasts forever. Corn lasts forever. You dry it and it's good. I mean, it's good for as long as it's dry, it stays dry. Corn lasts forever.
Yeah, but what's its nutritional value?
Corn.
Yeah, what's its nutritional value for humans?
You know what the nutritional value, Rick? When you eat a bunch of it and the next day you poop it back out, there's zero.
Corn and wheat.
Exactly.
Corn and wheat.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wouldn't know. My digestive tract must be better than yours, Josh. I don't know.
I'm gonna get in trouble for saying that.
But you
You
know,
probably will.
someplace like Laos is there is around close to 90% of their calories come from plants, and so they don't have the same issue. So
I was gonna say it'd be interesting if there's any vegetarians listening to call in and get a vegetarian perspective on the issue.
Rice lasts a long time. It's pretty selective where it's profitable to grow it, though. I think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just certain areas in the country where they grow rice. It's not like everywhere. I don't think. At least the store white rice. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't been around
Yeah,
farms
it's
in a long
specific
time.
planting conditions.
Going to be interesting. I think where I grew up in Idaho, also we lived right in the middle of it's called Sunny Slopes, where all the southeastern orchards are: apples, cherries, peaches, and all those things. And Trump has banned immigration. He signed an executive order to ban migrant workers to come into the United States because he said Americans need the jobs first. Where I grew up, and I know it's the same, picking the fruit and everything, that was migrant worker work. You never saw just your normal white Americans out there. They wouldn't be caught out there. I've told the story before. My brothers and I used to pick fruit with the Mexicans, and they'd always tease us and laugh at us because, white boys doing Mexican work. Those workers, a lot of them are not going to be showing up. There's already some of that going on in the hand-picked items like cauliflower and broccoli. They can't get the migrant workers in because they're banned from coming in, and they're banned from travel. So I think the fruit department, which relies on the same thing, we may be seeing something really hit us with your apple markets, cherries, and things like that. I don't know why they would escape it. I don't see how it can escape it.
It goes back to David's observation about the rule of law and the total breakdown of that, the inefficiencies of it.
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, it's just price inflations too.
Yeah, inflation also. Josh from Seattle, he and I were talking about supply chain stuff, and the supply chain's been heavily disrupted, obviously, globally. The supply chain is designed around efficiency, not anti-fragility. If we want to talk about one of Meat Tornado's favorite terms, and the cost. So there's a bunch of articles, like boring Wall Street Journal articles coming out talking about the cost of an efficient supply chain. And I got another book kicking around here.
Efficient at what time scale?
This is a really good book. Charles recommended a contemporary of this guy last summer, I think. And I ended up getting really into Deming. Deming says that everything is about quality. And in America, people ask the question, how good should I make this before I stop caring about quality? And Deming says, this book's, I don't know, it came out in 1980 or something. He says that shows like a lack of understanding of quality, because quality doesn't cost you money. Quality makes you money. And there's a cultural push to efficiency as a singular focus. And the problem with that is it's like a cyclops. A cyclops as a mythical being is it symbolizes a hyper focus on a single thing. And so a cyclops, is often like really big and strong and stuff, but it's never very smart. Like it can't solve problems and it can only see one thing at a time. And so the push for efficiency in the supply chain has made stuff like food prices low, but it's made the supply chain completely unable to absorb shock. And so all of these institutions and large companies are just going to get they're just going to get destroyed by this. And a bunch of these Wall Street Journal articles are coming out saying maybe we need to price robustness into the supply chain, which would be you could do that through a term like quality of service. Like if you want to talk about your internet connection, it's measured through QoS, and QoS, quality of service, is the amount of uptime. It's like, what percentage of the time is your internet available? And so that would be a way that you could do like the food supply chain. Instead of just singular price, it would be like how well, what's the quality of service when there's a disease in the field, or a disease in the animal, or a shortage of workers, or whatever. It's kind of the anti-fragility idea again. But it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah, that's totally different.
Yeah, the cool thing is, like, if you get your meat from Delta, price there probably won't change.
Hey, Mike, Meat Tornado thinks you're investing in Soylent Green.
Oh yeah, I may not agree with it, but I'll take money, right?
Sorry, I forgot that, Mike.
The price to get
Investment.
the price to get a moose out at moose camp, I think, is going down
Yeah.
because fuel's going
What do you
down.
mean?
Fuel's going down. It'll cost less for me to get out there.
Yeah.
Oh,
True.
and as far as we know, they haven't cut back on anything as far as hunting or fishing.
Well, they tried that with black bear season here in Alaska, and the outcry was pretty intense. I mean, it's the first time I've seen a directive reversed in the same day.
Oh, so they did reverse it.
I mean-
I didn't know they did.
He reversed the order, rescinded the order the very same day that they put it out.
Not well
There was
received.
pretty severe backlash. Yeah. And I
But
guess so.
somebody-
That might
you-
say something about people that have guns and hunt that make an outcry, because the government's like, do I want to be on the season? No. Replace bear season with governor season. You decided bear season was better.
Well, a couple shows ago, somebody was talking about it was okay to be out on your boat, but you couldn't fish. Does anyone remember that? That was a order somewhere.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I remember
Yeah.
that.
Oh, you couldn't commercially fish.
Okay.
Commercial.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Right. Yeah. Well, I
Oh,
mean, that gets into the whole question of what is commercial too. Anyway, there's all sorts of loopholes.
Brett Weinstein was talking about that, and he said that there is a bunch of, I think he lives in Portland. He said that there's a bunch of commercial fishermen who are just going to start selling fish from the deck of their boat. And he said he'll be the first one. He and his wife will be the first one at the docks to buy it. He thinks that's great. So said it's the best fish around right off the boat.
Yep.
Absolutely, they are.
Well, hey guys, I'm gonna. All good subjects, and we should talk more about the that nomadic issue, etc.
Yeah, well, you'll be able to follow. You and everybody else will be able to follow what we're up to this summer. We're going to be doing some cool stuff. Some of it nomadic, some of it not. Like we're planning on building out a studio in Fairbanks for real. So that's a project. We got
studio for the show.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
We got some on the go projects, potentially working on some RV type stuff, and then we just have some widgets we're going to build, and normal stuff we're going to do, but we're going to be documenting it more than we have on the show. And I know a couple other people who listen who are getting into crypto and stuff like that, not as like a speculative thing, but just as like a habit, like investing in a retirement plan. So there's a lot going on, and we'll continue to cover it in the summer. I'm excited to see what happens over the summer and then where we're all at in the fall. I think it's going to be cool.
There's a YouTube channel called 9CI that has a new series that documents their design process. So you can go check that out and learn about making stuff.
Yeah,
You know,
I'll put
that's a
link.
good point. That's a good point because we get a lot, and we are right now, questions about 5G. 5G questions and the effects that has. And basically, our sister channel, or Dave's business channel, 9CI, you guys cover that all the time.
Yeah, we're playing with that kind of technology and doing research on is that stuff harmful? Is it not? To what extent is it? And we're taking a different approach. Corey and I have talked about this. We're taking a different approach where we're not going to build for our customers. The stuff we build for them is super secret and everything. But we're going to be releasing our own products. And some of them would be actually Fairbanks specific. We might be making some remote monitors for Fairbanks stuff. Anyway, we're going to be releasing the information about how to build these things. They're going to be open source. And so people will be able to follow along what we're doing, what we're building. And, if you want, you can build your own, or if you want, you can buy one from us. But like this economic climate is a really unique opportunity to just share everything. And if there's jurisdictional lockdown and somebody wants to make something, go for it. If there's efficiencies, that we don't know about, other people can get in on that. So we're playing with some of those ideas. And that's also a way of building community outside of a specific area.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's perfect. Well, we'll talk to you guys later. Again, enjoyed it. Keep up the good work. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, Rick.
Yeah, good talking to you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. We maybe have to have a couple videos on how to smoke bear hams.
That'd be
That
great.
sounds like a lot of fun.
I know I'm making. I know there's probably a bunch of videos up on how to do birch sap the right way, but it kind of intentionally didn't watch any of those. I wanted to make my mistakes, so I'll make a video, and there'll be a bunch of people that comment and go, you did it wrong. Okay.
As you're pouring it on your fine waffles and pancakes and a little in the coffee.
Yep. You didn't do it how I would have done it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And they're stuck using high fructose corn syrup.
Yep.
Maybe not for long if they can't process the corn syrup into Aunt Jemima's syrup.
Right.
We'll see. We will see. On some Alaskan news, we kind of touched on it yesterday real quick, but the governor and different fishing communities, the borough and native councils in the different fishing communities had some sort of an agreement on how to open up commercial fishing this summer safely and all these things, which had some measures about people flying in, quarantining, and social distancing where they could, and which is pretty hard on a boat. I mean, it's actually dumb. It's kind of like social distancing at Walmart, and you got 12 people in the same aisle going the opposite way.
The whole boat has to distance from. It's like, I think it's more when you come to shore. Right.
But even then, it's how I did that. I don't know how but anyways, the emergency medical dictator of the state, she decided that the plan was null and void, so she nixed it. So as of now, there is not going to be commercial fishing in the state of Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Boy, not a lot of food.
Unbelievable to me. Yeah, with a lot of people to feed. Which, really, if you think about kind of compounds, we never think about as much, even though we do talk about it, the effects that are seen and unseen, with some of those with the China trade wars, we already had a reduction in Alaska fish processing from China because most of our fish go to Chinese plants that get processed and packaged and then shipped back to us in forms of fish sticks or fish patties or whatever. That was already taking a pretty large hit to the tune, I think, of, I forget how much money monetarily. It was a lot of money worth. And if you compound the disruption that was already there from government interference, and now more government interference of cutting the supply line off it completely, not in a good situation. Because our stocks were already down in those areas. No, it has to include the set netters. There's if you think about one of the things that you see with these laws, you think, well, why don't they? Even though the big corporations, for the most part, are being left open, you'll see a lot of things where you think, well, why can't people golf? There's 100 acres and 4-person groups or 1-person groups. They don't have to be near each other. Why can't these people do this or these people do that? It's kind of a equal opportunity tyranny. And there's a reason for that, because constitutionally you can't hit one sector of society and say, you can't do this, but you can. Tyranny has to be all encompassing lawfully. So no one could do anything. It's kind of like your little kid. You're like, well, how come he gets you? All right, fine. No one gets to go outside. Everyone go to your room. That's the way it works. Lawfully, everyone has to be punished. Because instead of saying, well, why can't this community open up to commercial fish? There's no outsiders. It's all the people from the village. Well, because we're not letting that nick, because so many people come from outside. We can't let you. So I don't think the set netters are going to get out of it, because if you can't let the drift netters fish and the process, the biggest problem is the processing again, Layla. Where do you take your fish? The processing plants are closed because they can't bring in the employees to work it. Mm-hmm. Unless we change our minds and the way our outlook on life, and we go direct, which again is stopped by regulations from the state, but go directly fishermen to market, fishermen to free market, fishermen to the final consumption source, which they could. It used to be done before we had big processing plants.
Right. And now there's an opportunity to do a lot of that stuff with technology and apps that tell you when boats are coming in and what's available. And that whole marketplace could be done electronically to some degree. We
should see whole new markets opening up, really, don't you think? People that want to take advantage of it, to think, hey, I'll get a hold of 5 ships or 5 drift boats or 10 set netters, and I'll buy it directly from you guys, and I'll do the distribution. So all you have to worry about is what you're good at, fishing. I'll do what I'm good at, distribution. He'll do what he's good at. The free market superseding what regulations are in place, which will make things hard. The transition's not going to be easy, but we're humans. We have to eat. We'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. We got brains. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm saying not everything has to be a bad. We can make goods out of bad situations.
It's not so far gone that, like, if people end up doing stuff that is illegal, it'll be up to that's necessary. It'll be up to the state to enforce it. And it's not obvious the state's going to enforce everything. Like, it doesn't look like they will right now. So could end up being not a big deal.
What's your opinion on, what do you think about that, guys, with enforcement's pretty low, and I think most of it's because it's being voluntarily done for the most part. Mm-hmm. Do you see pushback against some of the mandates turning into more enforcement of the mandates?
I think
if you're gonna get in our face, then we're gonna get in your face about it, basically.
Well, yeah. If you look at what happened in Michigan a couple of days ago, that's just going to be a natural occurrence. There's going to be, if they continue to push it in those states, there's going to be increased violence. That's just the natural course of events. And it's not. Don't really see it happening in Alaska, and the troopers seem to not be enforcing like the health or the quarantine mandate. Uh, if they start enforcing it, then it's natural you're going to start seeing some violence flare up. I don't think that they really want that at this point. Maybe in the future they will, as a way to bring order out of chaos. But I, whatever they do, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction. I think that's what we can count on. So we know that that's going to happen. Now where do we direct our attention? How is that reaction going to play out?
Yep.
My somebody I was talking to in Fairbanks had an interesting story about they had responded to some kind of snow machine accident, and this was like a month ago during shutdown and quarantine and all the scary stuff, and all the ambulance and the troopers show up and all that, and nobody was very concerned about social distancing, and they were just focused on what was the emergency at hand, and it didn't seem to be a big deal when they were out actually working.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So it's a lot of it is seems to be a dog with a big bark and no bite at this point, but see what they do in the future. Right now they're just seeing what people will put up with, what they'll voluntarily put up with, I guess.
Right, and that's going to vary from place to place.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Some of the
to a large degree it depends on the local government that has been elected, and they were elected in very calm times, and now everybody gets to see how they respond in an emergency. Mm-hmm. And that'll be a factor in their future voting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there may be a shift there for sure. That's a good point.
Because
a lot of the tyrants are little small town tyrants comparatively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It kind of made me think of, you remember the story about in Conceived in Liberty about the founding of Pennsylvania and the Quakers, Josh?
Mm-hmm.
And Blackwell, the guy that William Penn wanted to be the governor.
Yeah.
And the Quakers responded. Yeah, the Quakers responded by they had an official government, but they never actually meant to do anything. And they had the town seal, the town seal, and they never stamped anything with it. So none of the orders could ever be officialized. And then when Blackwell showed up as governor, no one ever showed up to pick him up to take him into town. And so eventually they just gave up on governing the place because the determination was these people are ungovernable. And it wasn't that they did anything rash. They just went about their lives and refused to even acknowledge that Blackwell State even existed. And they eventually just had to get rid of it. I'm kind of seeing a parallel to that with the whole idea of being nomadic.
William Penn was, and Penn was the only governor or person that was given a land grant by the king who went broke from it, because none of in his little fiefdom, that he set up for the Quakers, none of them would pay a tax. So he actually became broke from where every other person that was given a land grant, forced taxation, and were rich. And he picked the wrong people to be nice to, even though he was one too. He was a Quaker also. Just
right. Yeah. The whole reason he wanted to show that there could be a Quaker community that was viable, and all they proved that they can be viable. It can be viable, but it has to be anarchist. So.
Yep. Well, you know, some of the pushbacks are working in California with that butthead, where he opened up some things, and then he said too many people went to the beach, so he closed them down again. And but the pushback, people showed up anyways the next day, protesting. It looks like he's immediately backed off of that. So
Yeah, the example I
we'll
really
see.
like,
But I personally think that we're being slowly lulled into the fact that they're going to do round 2 this fall.
yeah.
Oh man.
And I think that's when it's going to get interesting, because so many people have lost their businesses, their livelihood, and everything. And if the government doesn't really amp up their payments to keep people at home, and they're looking at not just, you know, a 2-month lockdown that they had, a 3-month lockdown, but a full winter, not going to be pretty. Not going to be pretty at all.
Especially up in Fairbanks, where summertime's cheap to live relative to wintertime because of the fuel costs, the electric costs.
Yeah,
Well,
it's not good. And it's do you guys agree that we're being set up for that? Or set up for the possibility, I guess?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, a lot of people, I hang out with some guys who I would classify as normal, not in like a bad way. And one of them, well, yeah, they're pretty cool. They're pretty cool dudes. But anyway, they don't follow the Federal Reserve or monetary policy or anything. One of them said, this feels like a training run. And his observation was like, okay, so they shut down the hardware store. Like, he can't get a key to his apartment. They shut down the hardware store. But they let like 200 people into Walmart. And you're supposed to maintain, you know, separation or everything, right? But if you're going to let hundreds of people into a store, if you're not going to institute the policy as a blanket policy, then it's not going to work. If the disease is ultra hyper contagious, then this doesn't work. And so he was like, so what's the deal? What's really going on? And his conclusion that he came to on his own was, this is a training program. And when they do it next time, everybody will go, oh yeah, yep, been here before. And then they'll be able to turn the knob up one more notch.
Right.
And there's too much. The narrative about round 2 this fall is everywhere. Like, everybody's talking about it.
Well, now they're talking about 2 years. It was going to be 18 months. Now it's 2 years. They just keep pushing it.
Right.
So.
Just like when China was reopening, 2 more weeks.
2 more weeks.
Right.
We got a caller on the line here. I got to go in a couple minutes here. But let me bring in Mr. Meat Tornado. What is going on?
Man, how'd you know it was me?
Just a guess.
On that topic, and kind of talking about what Josh said last night, you know, ignore them out of existence. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Christianity, golden rule. When is it a time to fight back? Is there ever a time to fight back? What's the right way to proceed? And what I keep coming back to is this is the time to push back. I mean, if not now, when? I mean, I'm not advocating violence, but at the same time, there's lots of victims here, man. And I'm not going to tell a victim how to respond to their victimizer. Other than that, they should. And kind of to Corey's point, I know he already knows this, but we use the word government colloquially, and it's so ubiquitous, but we know there's no such thing as government. We know this. There's individual actors, you know, like the governor of Alaska, of Michigan, and whoever, these are individuals that are acting individually and collectively, but still they are in control of their actions and they need to be held accountable. I ain't saying any violence should be done to them. I'm not saying it shouldn't be one way or the other, to be honest with you. But what I am saying is they need to be approached. They need to be talked to. They need to be pointed out. This needs to be done, especially in light of everyone knows there's a second wave coming. I mean, this thing has really kind of been a good thing in the fact that it's really waking a lot of people up. And then the people that were pretty much woke, all their suspicions have been confirmed, or most of them have been confirmed. So not only are they now woke, they're got their hand on the door, they're walking out the door, they're fixing to go to work, you know? So this is the time for massive pushback. There's a time to build something up. There's a time to tear it down. I advocate tearing all these systems of control, of oppression, the architecture of oppression, the prison that we have built around ourselves, around our children, around our friends and our families. We need to tear them down. And if that means, you know, we're all different. If that means not working, not producing, so you're not paying taxes, then that's what that means. If that means trading, you know, and only using currencies that's not their currency, then that's what that means. I'm always going to advocate for peace, but this is not the time to be silent. This is not the time to be silent.
Yeah, you know, and there's a lot, like you were saying, MT, there's a lot of ways to do that. And here, where I'm at, there's a trail down by the river, next to where my van is, down by the river. And which I will be living in soon. And there's a trail, okay, and there's little roads that cross it. And at some of the road crossings, it says, you know, COVID-19 alert, maintain your distance, blah, blah, blah. And at some of the crossings, it says, COVID-19 alert, this area is closed. And then it has this big list of nasty things that'll happen to you if you use this trail by the river. And it's very sporadic and not entirely clear what the actual rule is. And everybody's out there using it, which I think is really cool. And these aren't like, you know, there are people in Guy Fawkes masks using the trail. These are normal people. And so the absurdity, it's a little bit like what Mike was talking about. When the thing gets pushed too far, people are just like, like whatever, can't be bothered with this. And not necessarily saying that, you know, there's nothing here, this whole thing is fake or whatever. Like these are people who are, you know, reasonable middle ground people, I guess you could say. But they're just not complying with little things like that. But then there's bigger stuff happening like that too, where there's a bunch of people I know who have been out of work for a while, and they don't really care where they get work now. And they don't really care. Most of them are pretty isolated anyway, and they're not around old people. They don't really care if they're exposed to people at more than 6 feet or less than 6 feet. It's like, if somebody offers me a job, I'm going to go take it. And some of these people are even receiving, you know, their checks from the government. But it's more like, I need to be doing something. And so the reality of the situation is sort of its own undoing for everybody who's following the rules. Like if you follow the rules, it makes your life worse in a whole bunch of ways. It makes your life better in almost none. At this point, you know, people just haven't gotten sick as much as it looked like. So a lot of normal people are just like, I'm going to take this responsibility on myself. I'm going to act in my own discretion.
Yeah, I love that. And God bless every one of them that are doing it. I mean, I'm not advocating any aggression whatsoever.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'm not advocating passivity anymore. I think in general, what I'm advocating, it's time to be assertive. That people need to assert themselves, and I don't know the best ways. I don't even know the best ways for me to assert myself. And I have a belief that people are very ingenious, and whatever way that somebody can assert themselves and their rights and the rights of their loved ones, they should, whatever that looks like. Even if they're working at some government job, then do a terrible, terrible job. Do something, right? You know? Maybe let a squirrel loose or something by a power plant. I don't know. Something.
I had a power outage here. I think it was a squirrel. So people are already doing that.
I mean, this is difficult. This has been very difficult spiritually for me, because I know my ways are pathetic. I mean, I'm a liar, adulterer, I'm a thief. I'm all these things. I've broken every commandment. I'm guilty of breaking the law. But I love Christ, and Christ has paid the price for me, and I understand that Christ's ways are way higher than my ways. And so I'm trying to learn and walk in those ways, but I can't, you know. I can see turning the cheek, you know, with, like, say, me and a friend get into an argument or something like that, and they lose their temper and they hit me. I can see that, you know, their brother, yeah, turn the cheek, forgive them, this and that. But with these tyrants and their evil agenda and what they're doing, I'm in a moral quandary. I don't know. I don't think it's righteous to just roll over and let them.
Do you think the opposite of that would work?
In all wars, there was always that but. You know, there was always that but. Yeah, it's wrong to kill. War's wrong. Love, you know, comma, but, ... This is different, right? That's what they always said. And now I find myself in that same position. Yeah, murder's wrong. This is wrong. Killing's wrong. Violence is wrong. Non-aggression is wrong. You know, comma, but this really is different. I mean, they're after our souls. You know, they claim the right to put poison in every one of us and chip us with a mark of the beast. This
I don't see how that's different.
Follow us around everywhere. This really, really is different. So that's the quandary I found myself in. And where I'm at, we just have to assert ourselves. We have to hold those individuals accountable.
What are you saying, Corey?
They should have
I think
peace. They should have no peace.
It's different in the details, but as a whole, it's the same as it's always been. It's the same as every war ever acted out.
As far as the sides feeling that they're right and things like that.
Right, and the place for.
But they are the aggressors.
Well,
These
except from their perspective. I mean, that's the game of figuring out who struck first. That's why it's a losing game. That's why that's why Christ said to turn the other cheek, is because the game of figuring out who is first is how you end up with that's how you end up with Israel Palestine. Who was first? Who hit first?
It turns into history scoreboards.
Okay. Yeah, but so I think you have a good point though. And Josh wrote this letter and mailed it out and got very interesting responses. And I think that the questions that he asked, at the very least, have made some people uncomfortable. And they've had to think about, well, what did I do here? And then there's a little bit of back and forth. There's some follow-up and stuff like that. I think a lot, one of the things Christ said with he's getting speared by guards and stuff while he's on the cross. And he says, they forgive them, they know not what they do. And one of the ways that you can address that is you can inform people what they're doing. And I think Josh's letter did a really, really good job of that. Like, hey, You guys are playing a game of law. Okay, so let's play the game of law. Here's what your laws say. Here's what you did. How does this work? And like Mike dug into that too. And so now those folks, whether or not, their opinion or their replies were something that we liked or whatever, that's certainly in their mind. It's going to be something they're thinking about. And it probably wasn't something they were thinking about when they allowed the governor to have these emergency policies or whatever, emergency powers. So going into the fall, like, that's a real deal thing. And I'm not advocating groveling or anything, but they know not what they do. One way to address that is to inform them what they're doing. Here is what you're doing.
And apparently those have been distributed out to people that where it would make, it's been distributed to people that is going to make them think about it, that were already wondering if they were doing the right thing or not. Let's think about Paul while he was in prison. He wasn't Paul had a little sort of sneaky way that he attacked the Roman Empire. Nero, for instance, there's a reason why Nero had him killed. It wasn't because he was preaching. He was making fun of Nero. When he talks about when running the long race and getting to the end and winning the race, that was a specific thing that he was talking about with Nero during a race that Nero ran where he fell and didn't finish the race. There's a lot of these cultural things and contemporary things that Paul was writing about that we just, unless we look into it, we have no idea. He wasn't just, and it goes along with when he was writing Romans 12 and 13. You can't read one without the other. He was aware of these things too, and he pushed back even from prison in the ways that he could. And part of that was to delegitimize the guy who said he was God, Nero, to the people that were following the true God. He showed where the false God wasn't standing up to being a God. Because look, he can't even finish a race. He's big and fat. He fell halfway around the course, and he lost. They picked him up and carried him across. And so Paul was making fun of him for it. So there's things that we can do and have to do before. Even if you think that violence is okay, in a certain extent of self-defense or whatever, I think there's a long road you have to travel before you get there. I mean, I don't want to compare Paul to Thomas Jefferson or John Locke, but, they wrote about long train of abuses. They didn't say, well, yesterday they locked us down for 2 months. They were going back to there's a reason why they talked about ancient forefathers and their ancient fathers' constitutions that were violated. They weren't talking about you're violating now. They were talking about for hundreds of years we've been putting up with this. So it's not it can't just be an irrational, now I'm mad because I'm locked down there's other avenues we have to do first. Now, if it's,
I agree.
On the other hand, if they're standing there with a shot and they're going to stick you with it, I'm going to say no. And especially if they try to stick my little kids with it, I'm going to do more than say no. I'm going to stick them.
See, there you go. That's where, and that's kind of where I'm at. I don't disagree with anything that was just said. I respect it. I admire everything that was just said. And I'm probably get off the point a little bit. My concern is not really surviving this physically. My concern is more surviving with my principles intact, or dying with my principles intact. And my concern is to my children. And so I was reading this book recently, and the guy kind of put me on a thought, or had a thought experiment in there. He said, and it goes like this. There's a person outside your house, and they've been stalking you. And this person is a well-known serial killer, serial rapist, pedophile, and all these other horrible things. And lots of people have tried to help and teach and get this serial criminal to stop. But they don't. They're irrevocable. But now they're outside your house. They're outside your door, and they're not going away. They're stalking you. Now what? What do you do now? You can go outside and preach them the gospel? Good question.
Some people will, nameless. I mean, that is what we're talking about, is the epitome of individualism. Because you're talking about every individual's relationship with God and every individual's relationship with other individuals. What you decide at whatever time that you have to do, that can only be your decision. It can only be my decision. It can only be Dave, Corey, everyone watching, Michael's. No one else can say, my conviction in this area is this, and thus I will do. And say, and now you will do also. Everyone's going to be accountable for their own actions. So it's really
I agree. That's
hard
what it should
to
be.
discuss.
Oh, and there is going to be a day of reckoning. And keep that in mind, too. There is going to be a reckoning for all of this. And everybody is going to have that reckoning. But back to the original point, and I agree with everything you said, Josh. Back to the original point of them, like, we know that another wave is coming. They're sitting around planning on what to do next if they don't already have it planned out. This is the time to be active. This is the time to get active. I think those days of waiting and seeing, and hoping for the best are gone. If people in general go back to that, I think that the noose is just going to tighten even more. And it's like
I don't think we have
to make ourselves anti-fragile, and there's all kinds of ways to, throw banana peels in front of the beast, if you will. So,
well, here's a perspective. They say they talk about the second wave coming, and what they're doing is they're just admitting that they're going to attack again in several months, right? So before you're able to physically push back, you have to be in a position where you can take care of yourself to do that. You're not going to be able to push back if all you have is an apartment, a rifle, and a 72-hour go bag. And that's not the constructive way to push back anyway. What we were talking about earlier, the nomadic lifestyle, get a place to have a farm, those are all things that make you independent, and those are the things to do now. But while they're the things that make you independent and prepare you to push back, they're also the pushback. Because when you become independent, you become decentralized. And what the state hates the most is a decentralized system. That's one thing they can't deal with. So that's the way I'm looking at it right now. That's what I'm looking at now. Is prepare for the pushback, and the act of doing that is the pushback.
No, I totally agree, and to that point as well. Simple, operant and Pavlovian conditioning, which is what they deal with a lot of times. I'm going to reward good behavior, what I think is really good behavior, and I'm going to shame and discourage bad behavior. And that's all I'm really saying right now as far as being assertive. We should shame those who have had some very, very poor behavior. And we should thank and reward those who've had good behavior. And so for those people in Michigan who went and asserted their God-given rights, I give praise to them. Thank you. I would like to reward that behavior.
One of the greatest speeches, or it was a lecture that I listened to along these lines, was by Robert Morey, and it was called "And God Mocked Them." And he goes through the Old and New Testament and shows where different prophets and Christ and Paul, like with Nero, ridiculed with mockery the evil that was prevalent at the day, not for their own, status points or whatever, to get likes or clicks on Facebook, but it was to show, let's say when Elijah was up there and they burnt the sacrifices with the prophets of Baal, where's your God? He made fun of them with the whole congregation watching up on the hill. Where's your God at? He must be sleeping. Is he on the toilet? Where's your God? Why isn't your sacrifices being burned up? And in front of he was making fun of them. And then, of course, he called down fire and burnt them all up. That was an object lesson for the audience. When Jesus was standing with the Pharisees, he had hundreds, thousands of people around him. And that's when he pointed to the Pharisees and said, "You blind guides of the blind, you serpents, you children of Satan, your father's the devil." They're doing the same thing. What I think that you're talking about doing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's to who it's focused on too. The ones that are doing the evil. And I think not so much the people that know not what they do, like what David said. There are some people that know darn well what they're doing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with focusing on them for the rest of the people.
You had a really good point you made, I think maybe in a private text or something like that. After writing the letters, one of the things that you realized was how human a lot of these people are. And I mean, that's a really good point. Mm-hmm. And it's something to not be forgotten. It's something to be kept, in memory. Like, a lot of these people are just messed up, fallible, scared human beings, but others are not.
I want to go back to your hypothetical situation about the guy outside your door. So Charles McCarthy has this bit, and I forget if it was Charles McCarthy or George Zabilchek on a TV show, and it was during the Cold War, and they were talking about what happens if the bombs fall and everyone goes to their bomb shelter and you're hunkered down. And
I got you. The Christian would let the other person in.
I'm gonna finish it because not everybody knows. And so the question is, do you let people into your bomb shelter? But there's only enough food for so many people. So the Christian thing is for you to get out and let them go in. And that is obviously not practical, and what bomb shelters are not why people buy those. But it's that response is so confounding to the material worldview that it causes people to think. But, and here's my point, is that in order to even have that option available to you, you have to train yourself in the way of nonviolence. Otherwise, you'll never even think about it. That whole solution space is completely unavailable if that's the first time that you've tried to practice it is when the cards are down. You'll always take the materialist response unless you've trained yourself.
Yeah, that was McCarthy, Truth and Choices. It was great. But back, and it's a good point. Well, and it's definitely taken. But still, there's that outlying, or those outlying people. I'm not giving up my shelter for Bill Gates' home. You know what I mean? So some stranger that I don't know, probably, I would like to think of myself.
Again, I'm not talking about what your response is in that situation. I'm saying that any response besides a materialist one is not available to you unless you've been thinking about this for a long time and practicing it in small ways.
My concern also is children and my grandchildren. It's like can't do nothing. Can't just, something's got to be done.
Well, and what does need to be done? I mean, I think we're getting off. If we're going to talk about being believers of the way, we've been told what the way is. I mean, and we fall victim to this on this show. I do it. We're told not to worry about tomorrow because today has enough problems of its own. And here we are. We do this to ourselves every day. We sit here and think, let's see, what's the economy going to look like next week, next year, 2022, 2021? Are they going to lock us down again this fall? And we're specifically commanded not to worry about that. because there's enough to worry about today. And it's hard to do. I'm blaming I'm saying I do the same thing, but there's a reason, right? He wouldn't tell us to do something that was detrimental.
Okay, but your point's right. Okay, you're not wrong, but there's a but. And I'm not trying to be argumentative with you, but think about history, and history is supposed to kind of guide us in this and that. What if the Christians in Nazi Germany or Stalin's Russia or the Christians here in America, when this country's been bombing people and doing all this, what if they were vocal? What if they had been vocal during that time? Would things have been different? I mean,
unknown.
Could have been. Yeah,
Unknown.
I don't know.
We need to be vocal. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think we certainly should. I mean, yeah.
Well,
They don't
no,
have to be Christian. I mean, just good people. Just good people. Just good people need to get vocal. And
Who defines good people? Because there's a lot of people who are vocal and they all think that they're good.
Vocal and non-aggressive. Yeah, everybody thinks they're good. Holmes.
Okay. And from what I said there too, I didn't say that we shouldn't plan for tomorrow. We're told not to worry, and we, especially with right now, we base a lot of decisions that we make on worrying. We were given a brain to think and plan. Obviously, God talks about the sower that, obviously he thinks when he goes and sows. He knows what he needs to do when he sows. He knows what he needs to do to raise the crop, and he knows what he needs to do to harvest way before it actually happens. So planning and worrying are two different situations. We have to be careful that we're doing the right one. Because if we base everything we do out of fear, then we're worrying. And 9 times out of 10, when I do something out of fear, it's usually the wrong one because it's a reaction. Instead of being proactive, I'm reacting.
No, I'm coming from a pragmatic point of view. Is doing nothing all this time, a little bit here, a little bit, but essentially doing nothing all this time is what's got us where we're at. Not just like us as a small group of people, individuals, but
what about Ludwig von Mises?
Humanity in general. This is pragmatic. This is pragmatic. It's not fear. It's not worry. Yeah, there's a little bit of it both there, but there's certainly not an obsession with either one of those. The obsession is more with what is the right thing to do and what are the right actions to take, because inaction is obviously not it.
Well, I'm going to use a little bit of devil's advocate some more here too, and I am kind of playing this game. Do you have a right to fight before you flee? If you're able to flee and you choose not to, does that give you the right to stand and kill? Mises, a guy that we all admire, I think for the most part, he didn't stay and fight. He skedaddled to America.
A lot of the Mennonites left Europe in several waves.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if there's any way that you can flee the situation before killing, that's what you should do. I think killing and violence and should be the absolute last case scenario. I don't think it should ever be planned. I mean, I don't think you should ever. I would hope that every action somebody makes would be to avoid that.
Well, going back to what you're asking about the German people, if they had risen up against Hitler and spoke out against him, what happened have happened? And the real issue is that political leaders come to power because of the events or the thinking of the society. They're a consequence of the mental illness of the society. The Stalin would not have come to power had the Russians not had the mindset that they did. The same is true of Hitler. So what expression do we have now? We have people now who have become so used to comfort in a centralized type of society where they're provided for and they have the safety nets, that they're willing to accept things like mandatory mask wearing, lockdowns, 6-foot social distancing, all based out of fear. But if society continues and it goes the direction that we're talking about, which is kind of what's going to happen, where it breaks apart, the union breaks apart because it's no longer viable, and people like us become somewhat nomadic, or we're farming our own food, then we move out and we don't have those safety nets, and we get used to that, and we see that we can take care of ourselves, and that's how the pushback occurs. That's how the mental illness is cured. But that takes time, and so it's a matter of being the first ones to go out to separate ourselves from society's mental illnesses.
Well, you made
Right.
2 points there, and I'm going to. I like to speak on the first one, because I'm definitely with you on the second one. And I don't know what the solution is, but I know what I'm guilty of, and I've been guilty of not talking truth and not talking gospel and not talking Christ and principles with people to save their feelings, to not rock the boat, to be easy to get along with, not necessarily to be liked. I never really was interested in being liked by most people, but I didn't really want to rock the boat either. You know, if they're a Buddhist, or if they were gay, or if they were this, or if they were that, you know, I was guilty of not speaking to avoid bad feelings, and my theory is I shouldn't have been doing that. I should have been, and maybe in a sense I've been robbing other people. You know, maybe in a sense I've been robbing the street preachers who've been out there and doing God's work and stuff like that by me being silent. Right? There's other people that have been doing the work in here. I've known a lot of truth for many years and this and that, and had the same feelings and same heartbeats and this, but I've just been inactive. So, not to sound like a narcissist, but in a sense, maybe I've been robbing those people of me, of my personality, of my voice, of my this, of my that, or anything I could have helped them with. Not that I'm God's gift, because we all know that I'm not. But I think you know what I'm saying. So yeah, definitely going to be nomadic, brother. Definitely moving in that direction. Definitely looking for anti-fragility. Definitely looking to diversify, but not doing it for material reason. I'm doing it to help the children of God and the people who don't take this mark of the beast. And I'm no longer going to be silent ever again. And I'm going to study how Paul and Jesus and them mocked these rulers who shouldn't be. Because at the very least, they should be made to think about the consequences of their actions on themselves and on others. And with that, we'll get off the phone.
Well, before you go, I'll just say one last thing with this whole thing with, what Rick just typed in there about living, the results of reacting in fear. Both of the legislators that I talked with, when I asked why, okay, let's get past the what gives you the authority to do these things. Why did you do it? And both of them said the same thing. Well, we're scared to death. We have a lot of older legislators in here that are scared to death that they're going to get sick and die. So, they're humans. They were reacting out of a human fear that they themselves are going to get sick. So they implemented whatever measures to protect themselves. It wasn't to protect Josh Bennett and his family in Fairbanks. It wasn't to protect Corey and his family in Fairbanks. It was to protect themselves. They were scared because they're humans. So part of that speaking out's got to be to defeat fear, which is the hardest thing of all. I mean, I really think it's not going to be long where if you don't wear a mask out in public, you're going to be shamed into it.
I don't think it's. No, I don't think it's. I think it's hard for lots of people, though. I really don't think it's hard. I really don't think cognitive dissonance in general is hard to get over, or fear. I think you just have to speak it. I'm Scott. I'm fallible. I've made mistakes. I've been scared. I've been wrong. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Help me, give me knowledge. Help enlighten me. I want to be a better person. I'm fallible. I'm imperfect. I'm sorry. I've been scared. This is why I'm scared. I'm scared for my children. You just got to speak it. You got to speak it, and you got to look at it, and you got to do the internal mental work on it. Don't hide it. Don't deny it. Just speak it. Just humble yourself. Come clean. It's not that hard. I'm scared for my children.
All right. Well,
Because I love them. And I don't want bad things to happen to them. And I'm scared for Americans in general because I care for them. And I don't want to see them suffer. And I certainly don't want anybody to go to hell. But I'm fallible and I'm limited and I'm just one person and I'm doing the best I can. And I'm open to ideas and perspectives to help advance goodness forward. It's not that hard. Simple, man.
all right. Well, we're at 3 hours, so.
All right, peace.
Yeah.
Love y'all.
Thanks.
Okay.
Take care, man.
All right, bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Guys, got anything you want to close out with?
Pretty much done for me.
Yeah, good here. Be nice to end on something positive, or more positive. There's a lot to do. I mean, we've talked about stuff in previous shows and this show, and I think the big thing is provide better alternatives than fighting, and act that out in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if everyone decides they're just going to, fight physically, that's a centralized response, and they can respond to that very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're playing a game that they're much better at. So.
Yeah, the American Revolution, even though it was a physical fight, was won because it was a decentralized battle or decentralized war. Had they just followed the standard tactics of George Washington, they would have lost.
Mm-hmm.
So decentralized is the answer, and the beginning of that is going to be prepare themselves to survive and to prosper individually and with their friends and their families, rather than depending on the centralized system. And it's some might say it's kind of late for that since we're going into that, but I don't think it's too late for that. It's never too late to get started. So
right.
Get started and see how far you go, and don't worry about it, because if you worry about it, that's going to slow you down.
I'll borrow David's quote that the best time to plant a tree is 15 years ago, and the next best time is right now. So.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks, everyone.
We'll talk to you next week. Actually, probably on Monday. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.